Today, we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the nasty god of Teen Titans? Please subscribe this channel, because definitely I will try my best to provide a valuable content for you all. Also check the description to support the original author for this beautiful creation. A shadowy figure rushed past a camera, using stealth to evade detection. The figure silently crept through the dark hallways, avoiding security guards, cameras and other security devices. The figure turned a corner and saw a few guards heading his way. Instantly the figure went back where he had come from. The figure decided to wait for the security guards to leave, but had no such luck as they stopped and started talking about random things that the figure didn't really care about. It wouldn't have been hard for the figure to sneak past them. The problem was that they were standing in front of the room the artifact he was supposed to steal was in. Great, just what I needed. The figure thought. The figure tried to find another way to get inside the room without the guards noticing. As a flash of lightning struck, it illuminated the shadows enough to see that the figure was male, but that was all that you could tell. As the figure tried to figure out a way to get into the room, he leant his head back looking at the ceiling. Instantly he noticed the ventilation system. That works, thought the figure as he looked back around the corner to make sure the guards were still occupied with their conversation, which they were. Silently the figure jumped to the ceiling and stuck to it. A red energy of sword appeared over his hand and soon took the shape of a kunai, and then it turned into one as he used it to pry open the vents. The figure quickly climbed into the vents and replaced the covering. He moved quickly but quietly through the vents over the guards and above his target. As he moved to a different vent, he looked into the room. The room itself was dimly lit and empty except for a glass container that held what looked like a big piece of metal, but this wasn't just any metal, this was pure plutonium, which is very dangerous. As the figure took off the vent cover and lifted it into the was about to jump down, but a strange feeling made him look around. As he pressed a button on a watch he had on, the eyes of the mask turned red. As he looked into the room again, he could easily see dozens of lasers crossing all around the room, making it hard for any normal person to even get close to the container. This makes things even more interesting, thought the figure as he slowly came out of the vents and stuck to the ceiling once more. As the figure took a calming breath to clear his head and get ready for what he was about to do. After calming his breathing, the figure crouched low on the ceiling. Instantly he jumped forward and landing on the floor showed a lot of acrobatics by flipping through all of the lasers without being touched once. As the figure landed in front of the container, he quickly got to work in getting the plutonium before the guard came in to check on it. Seeing as the glass was bulletproof, the figure couldn't use a glass cutter. Pulling out the kunai from earlier, the figure took one last calming breath before putting the kunai up to the glass. If anyone were to look closely at the blade, they would notice that it started glowing a bit. As the figure finished cutting a large hole in the glass, the figure turned the blade back into the red energy before absorbing the energy back into his body. Raising the sleeve of his shirt up, the figure placed one hand over his wrist, and the next second there was a puff of smoke as a large square box appeared on the floor next to him to hold the plutonium. The figure slowly pushed his hand through the hole in the glass and lifted the plutonium up as his gloves were made for handling it, but as soon as the plutonium was lifted, the lights in the room switched on and an alarm went off. Cursing silently, the figure quickly put the plutonium in the box and closed it. The figure then held one of his hands in an odd sign and the box disappeared the same way it had come. It was at that moment the guards from outside the room came bursting through the door with weapons at the ready and saw the plutonium missing. Their attention instantly shifted to the other figure in the room. The figure was wearing a black baggy pants with a black singlet-looking shirt over it. There was what appeared to be armor on a few places on the suit, with a belt wrapped around the person's waist and a black watch on his wrist. He also had on a red vest of sword over his shirt. The figure also wore a pair of black sandals, and on his hands were a pair of black gloves that went up to his elbow, think Anbu uniform. Also covering the figure's face was what appeared to be a white mask which had the face of a fox with a few things added to it like the infrared vision and other tech, and thanks to the added light you could also see some red-colored hair. He also had a sash wrapped around his neck which had at least a dozen shuriken, and strapped to his pants was what looked like an overlarge knife but was really a giant shuriken. The guards instantly pointed their weapons at the figure. "Freeze!" the guard in front shouted. "Sorry, but I can't do that," replied the figure as he started walking forward. The guards instantly prepared their weapons to deal with the intruder. As the figure kept walking forward, the guard opened fire. They were taken off guard when the figure blurred out of existence. "You shouldn't have done that," They heard a voice say from behind them. Instantly they spun around only for the guard that was in the back to get a punch to the face followed closely by a spin kick to his stomach. The other guards watched their comrade get sent flying and hitting the container, knocking him out instantly. The other guards immediately opened fire but were again surprised as the figure started dodging the bullets with an amazing show of speed. Soon they heard the familiar "C kick" sound signaling that their weapons needed reloading. Before they could even try though, the figure appeared in front of another guard, gripped him by his head, lifted him up and slammed his head into the ground with a lot of strength, knocking that guard out as well. Not even giving the guards time to catch themselves, the figure appeared between two more guards, once more performing a spin kick to the guard's head, sending the man flying head first into the wall, leaving a large dent. They knew that was one more guard down. The figure followed up by dropping low to the ground and performing a sweep kick, knocking the guard, which was a woman this time, feet from out under her, followed by getting up and dropping one foot down on her chest with enough force to knock her out. The rest of the guards, which were only 5, finally managed to catch themselves and quickly regrouped with each other in a circular formation, hoping that it would give them a better chance. They were wrong. The figure once again blurred out of existence and appeared in the middle of them. Instantly the figure's hands blurred, hitting each of the last 5 guards in the back of their necks, knocking them out. The entire fight took no longer than 2 minutes, and the figure had taken out 9 highly trained guards in that time without using his weapons or killing anyone. The figure was about to let out a sigh until he heard people coming, a lot of people. The figure instantly turned around, ran back and jumped into the vents. He silently placed the cover back on as the room was filled with more guards trying to figure out what happened. As they noticed the plutonium missing, one of the guards instantly called for the building to be locked down and searched for the intruder. Obviously he was in command because the rest of the guards instantly followed his orders except the few that were helping the downed guards. The figure moved silently up through the vents to get to the roof. As he came out on the roof, the figure reached up to his mask and pressed another button. "I have what you need." The figure spoke into the radio of his mock. After a few seconds a voice replied, "Great, now get back here so I can finish my work." "Roger that, Gizmo." The figure replied. "See you back at HQ." As the figure turned the radio off, he heard the door to the roof burst open and a few guards came running out. They had come to secure the roof but were surprised to find the figure standing there. Instantly the guards opened fire. The figure turned around and started running towards the edge of the roof and jumped over the edge. It was a good 50 stories fall to the ground. As the guards ran over to the ledge, they were surprised to see the figure was nowhere in sight. A block away the same figure appeared on another roof in a twister of wind and leaves. That was a close one, thought the figure as he jumped off of this roof also, except this building was only 3 stories. Landing on the ground, the figure walked up to a black Chevrolet Camaro. Going to the trunk and opening it, the figure took off his mask, revealing blonde hair with stripes of red here and there, showing a wig strapped to the mask, blue eyes and 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek. Throwing the mask into the trunk, the figure grabbed a bag out that had clothes in it. Changing from the clothes he had on before, the figure now wore a long blue jeans pants with a white t-shirt and a pair of white tennis. He also had what appeared as a large crafted diamond hanging around his neck by a rope chain, and he still had on the watch. Throwing the bag that now held the clothes he was wearing back into the trunk and closing it back. Jumping into the car, the figure was about to start it until he heard a ringing sound. Looking around before reaching into the gloves compartment, the figure pulled out a cell phone and answered it. "Hello?" the figure asked. Instantly a voice answered, and by the tone you could easily tell it was a female. "Naruto?" the voice said. "Are you okay?" asked the figure, now identified as Naruto. Answered the worried person. "I'm fine, Jinx. You should know I can handle myself. So you're okay. Good, because when you get back here I'm so gonna kick your ass. How could you take this stupid mission from Gizmo and not even tell me?" the voice, now identified as Jinx, said, shouted. Naruto instantly pulled his ringing ear away from the phone. As he waited, he heard Jinx finally calm down. "Are you finished?" he asked. "Yeah," came his reply. "Good," Naruto said. "I'll explain when I get back." "You better," muttered Jinx. "See you soon," Naruto replied while hanging up. As he started up the car and drove off, Naruto couldn't stop remembering how much he had changed in the 3 years he had been in this had world. He stopped acting like a dumb idiot and even stopped wearing orange like he did. He still wore it but not as much as he used to. The 18-year-old had learned many things in the time he had been here, from how to drive to how to use guns, build a few things and speak different languages. And fly planes and many other things, thanks to the Kyuubi increasing his brain capacity. He now had an IQ of over 300, making him as smart if not smarter than Gizmo, and it also gave him a few telekinetic abilities. He would have continued his trip down memory lane if he hadn't reached their secret HQ. Their HQ was just an old abandoned 60-story hotel building that Naruto had tricked the mayor to sign over to him using a genjutsu and renovate back to its former glory. Thanks to that, Naruto now owned one of the best and most luxurious hotels in Jump City and never had to pay a cent for anything, and was also considered as one of the bachelors of Jump City, though no one knew how he truly looked since no one had managed to meet the owner. He had also used genjutsu on some of the biggest names in Jump City, making them believe that they had stayed there and had a good time, thus spreading word of the hotel to other big names and helping it to gain publicity, thus the reason for the hotel being one of the best. Their HQ was like a large base right under the hotel that had everything they needed, from holographic training room, robots and anything else that him and Gizmo could think of, and thanks to the income of the hotel they never had to rob money, only other things like the plutonium he had just stolen. Everyone that worked in the hotel were also robots, seeing that you couldn't trust much people with their kind of work. As he pulled into the parking lot, he turned off the car and got out. He then walked into the building, passing guests as he went to the receptionist. "Good day, Mr. Uzumaki, you're back later than usual," the receptionist said. As Naruto looked at his watch, he noticed that it was almost midnight. He then looked up at the receptionist. "Do you have anything for us?" he asked. As the receptionist replied with a negative, Naruto turned and walked to the elevator, and seeing that no one was in it, quickly punched in a code on the keypad. Instantly a secret door opened in the back of the elevator, revealing another elevator, except unlike the first elevator that took you to the different floors in the hotel, this one takes you to different levels of their base. Pressing the button for the lab, Naruto instantly felt the elevator start going down. Soon the door opened to reveal what looked like a lab with a bunch of computers and other machines. It also had some vehicles, some finished and some not. He walked up to a short bald kid wearing a green jumpsuit with a pair of green goggles with a black hourglass shape in the middle of the lens on his head and a strange backpack-looking device on his back. His eyes were also a yellow color. The kid was working on something. Although he was small, Naruto knew he was smart. He was just going to let the kid finish his work until he got an idea and a devious smile crept up on his face. Silently he crept up behind the kid while putting his mouth by his ear. Taking in a large amount of air, Naruto shouted in the kid's ear as loud as he could. "Whatcha doing, Gizmo?" he screamed. Gizmo, as he was identified to be instantly, jumped in the air from fear. Obviously he hadn't heard the elevator or hear Naruto walk up beside him. "What the fuck was that for?" shouted Gizmo after he caught his breath and managed to calm down his heart. As he looked at the laughing blonde, "You need to pay better attention to your surroundings," laughed the blonde. As Gizmo continued to glare at the blonde, a door leading into the lab suddenly opened and in walked a girl. She was a bit tall with pink eyes, and she was wearing a black dress with long sleeves and a pink sash-looking piece of cloth wrapped around her collar. Her hair was done up into two horns and each pointing up in the air and wrapped with black cloth. She also had something resembling a collar wrapped around her neck and was wearing a pair of pink and black striped stockings with a pair of black shoes with low heels. She instantly walked up to the blonde on the floor and gripped him by his shirt, lifting him up, also showing a surprising amount of strength. Instantly the blonde stopped laughing and he had a nervous look on his face. "What's up, Jinx?" he asked. This is where I'll end, for let me know what you think about my first chapter and don't forget to R&R. This is Ghost signing out. Chapter 2. Okay folks, here's Chapter 2, and to one of my first reviewers, Hades 252-2. Yes, I do plan on doing a few flashback chapters showing how Naruto got where he is now. Also to X Stouffer there will be a pairing, though I won't say who. So without further interruptions, let's start Chapter 2. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto or Teen Titans, but if I did, let's just say things would be a lot more interesting. Thought. Hello demon. Yelling. Hello radio, phone, etc. Hello talk. Hello. What's up, Jinx? The blonde asked the girl, now identified as Jinx. What's up? That's all you have to say after a stunt like this? She asked. Even an idiot could tell she was pissed, and quite frankly both of the boys in the room were considered geniuses. What are you talking about? Asked the blonde, and what he got was a glare before Jinx said, what were you thinking when you took this stupid mission? I mean, you could have gotten hurt and all because Gizmo gave you this stupid mission. First off, Naruto replied, Gizmo didn't give me this mission, I took it because what I went for is something I needed for my plans, and secondly, there's no way I could have gotten hurt. Hell, they never would have even knew I was there if I had thought they had the thing on a pressure stand, and thirdly, I could have taken out everyone in that building without breaking a sweat. He finished with an annoyed glare. Both Jinx and Gizmo, who for once was watching silently, knew that statement was true. You couldn't be not only the best but most perfect student the Hive Academy ever had without being good, and Naruto was considered as both. Jinx thought about this, and although she knew he was right, that didn't make her worries lessen any. She was worried about all her friends actually, and for good reason, seeing the type of work they all did. Any of them could be taken down at any time, and that scared her. Their group was good, and thanks to Naruto they had a healthy source of income, though no one knew how Naruto had not only got the mayor to sign the building over to him but also get the mayor to renovate it and get so much publicity. All Naruto had said was that it was a ninja technique and left it at that. But that still didn't mean that they didn't do what they were trained to, it just meant that they could go after better things. I'm sorry, she heard a voice say, and instantly looked at Naruto. I know that you were only worried about me, and maybe I should have told you, but there was no time. They were going to move the plutonium tomorrow, and then it would have been even harder to get, he said. Jinx, who had already been informed of what Naruto went after thanks to Gizmo, just let out a sigh. It was when Naruto did things like this that she realized she couldn't stay mad at him. His sad blue eyes were just too much for her, and she knew he could take care of himself, and that was also the reason she had a crush on him. Naruto might have been very intelligent with scientific or other things like that, but when faced with emotional problems he was very stupid, leaving everyone to wonder if he was ever even in a relationship in his life. So what did you need plutonium for anyway? She asked, and at that Naruto remembered his package. Once more putting his hand by his wrist, the box appeared in the same fashion as last time. This was yet another thing that had everyone confused, the way that Naruto could seal things into almost anything. Naruto had explained the technique by telling them that the seals he drew were like a medium used to take whatever he sealed to a sort of pocket dimension and to bring it back. He also told them that he could seal almost anything, and showed them by taking a blank piece of paper and some ink and drawing a seal on them. He explained that there were different level seals for different things. After finishing the seal, he had moved and drew another seal on a few of the fighter drones. When he had done that, he then turned to them and performed a weird hand sign, and in a puff of smoke all the drones he had drew the seal on had disappeared. After a moment he did the hand sign again, and the drones appeared in puffs of smoke. Though they didn't understand it, they knew something like that was very useful. As she came back to the present, she watched Naruto grab the box and effortlessly lift it over to a table in the lab. He then turned to Gizmo. Is it ready? He asked. No, the construction drones should be finished soon though. Good, was Naruto's response. Jinx looked between the two before finally getting angry about not knowing what they were talking about and voiced it. What the fuck are you two talking about? She screamed. Instantly Naruto walked over to the computer and then typed in a few commands. A picture soon appeared on the large screen. It looked kinda like a jet or plane of some sort, though she couldn't really tell how it looked because it was only blueprints. A jet? She asked, but Naruto just smirked. A spacecraft, he answered as though it was the most obvious thing. Jinx was now confused. Why did they need a spacecraft, and that still didn't answer what the plutonium was for? What do we need a spacecraft for? She asked. Naruto looked at her. To get to the Centauri prison, of course, was his reply. Jinx was both confused and scared. She couldn't have heard right. Naruto was planning on going to the Centauri prison, one of the most ruthless prisons in the galaxy. She only had one thing to ask. Why the hell do you want to go there? She yelled, though Naruto didn't seem bothered in the least. He again went to the computer and typed in a few more commands. Another picture popped up on the screen, except this one was a girl. She had long black hair and black dark-colored eyes. She also wore what appeared to be body armor and a dark-colored miniskirt and singlet-looking shirt and a pair of knee-high boots of the same color. On her waist, by her collar and on the back of her hands were some sort of dark-colored stones that she didn't recognize. Her name's Blackfire. She heard Naruto say from behind her. She's a Tamaranian and it also appears she's Starfire's sister, though the two don't get along for some reason. He said before once more typing in commands, and this time a video popped up showing Blackfire fighting her sister Starfire. The two actually looked the same except where Blackfire wore armor, her sister didn't. Also, instead of black hair, Starfire had bright red hair. She also had green eyes and dressed similar to her sister, except the fact the clothes she was wearing were a pinkish, purplish color and the stones were also green like her eyes. Though the fight didn't last long, it was enough to make Jinx come to a conclusion in her mind. "So you want her because of her strength?" she asked, stated. Naruto looked at her for a few seconds before replying. "Yes, and because she would be a great ally to have and to help strengthen our group." Jinx could see the reasoning behind the idea but didn't like it. After all, this girl might come and mess up everything she had worked for in order to get Naruto to notice her. But she also knew that once Naruto decided on something there was no way to change his mind, but that didn't mean she was letting him do this alone. "I'm coming with you," she said, ready for a negative reply to come from Naruto. She had already thought of her argument for him to let her come but was surprised by his response. "Sure, as a matter of fact I was planning on taking Mammoth as well. After all, him and you will work on distraction while Gizmo stays here and guide us and I get her out." She was surprised but instantly realized Naruto had already made plans for this mission. "How long before the jet's ready?" he asked Gizmo as the midget once more joined the conversation. "A few weeks with testing the thing out," replied the midget. There were few things Gizmo took seriously and his inventions were one of them. "Then we use that time to prepare for an advantage," replied Naruto. Jinx looked confused. What did they need to prepare for? She knew that Naruto had planned this and she or anyone else had yet to see any of his plans not work. Another reason he had become their leader. "What do we have to prepare for?" she asked. Naruto looked at her before saying, "We need to train to take out these guys, and that's why I am getting Gizmo to try and hack their computers and security cameras so we can get the layout of the prison and hopefully find out how the guards fight." Once again Jinx could see the logic. As soon as Naruto finished, Gizmo replied with a, "Got it." Going to the computers and starting to try and hack the Centauri prison. Jinx only had one last question that she hadn't gotten an answer to. "So what's the plutonium for?" she asked. Naruto once more typed onto the computer and this time suits of some sort appeared. They were full body suits, while the body of the suits were a bit bulky and had spaces between the metal so that the knees and elbows and other joints could move freely but were also protected. The helmets had visors over the lenses, think Halo uniforms. Each suit were custom made to match their users. Terre was a green one, a large black with gold, a red, and a pink one. She could easily tell which one was for who. The red one had 2 slots on the back and she knew it was for Naruto to put what he called his chakra sabers. They were swords of sort that's only the hilt, but when he pumps his chakra into it red blades appear. These were just one of the many weapons Naruto had designed for himself. She also noticed the green one was a lot smaller than the rest, but seeing Gizmo she knew why, and the pink one had a more feminine look and not just because of the color. "We need it to power the jet in these," he replied. She instantly understood. The plutonium was a power supply for their equipment. Naruto then looked around and seeing that there was nothing else for him to do, he turned around and started heading for the elevator. Looking back he realized that Jinx was thinking hard about something. Turning around he went and stood in front of her. After a while, with her still oblivious to the world around her, Naruto once more got an evil look. Seeing that Jinx's eyes were glazed over a bit, he slowly went behind her. Slowly he raised his hand and brought it down towards Jinx's, but with a resounding slap Jinx jumped into the air from shock and a little pain. She glared around for the culprit and spotted both Naruto and Gizmo laughing loudly. She would have said something had she not remembered where she was hit. An evil smirk appeared on her lips as she seductively walked up to Naruto. "So did you like it?" she asked. Naruto looked completely shocked. He had been expecting to get the shit beat out of him, but instead he was asked if he liked it, and to tell the truth he actually did. As he stuttered over his words, Jinx just turned around and walked away swaying her hips. "You coming?" she asked innocently. Naruto could only nod his head in reply as he got up and followed the girl to the elevator. As the two got in, Naruto, who had regained his composure, pressed a button and the doors slid shut. Gizmo couldn't help but shake his head. Put a mathematical problem in front of him and he could do it with ease, but if you put a girl there it was a completely different case. He knew that it wasn't the fact it was a girl but who the girl was. Gizmo had seen Naruto turn down many girls during their time at the Hive, and although many of them made certain suggestions to what they could do together, Naruto had never even batted an eyelash. He would remain completely emotionless and continue to reject the girls until they gave up for the moment. To tell the truth, Gizmo had actually thought he was gay because he was rejecting girls that every other guy in school would kill for just to get them to talk to them. They had graduated recently at the top of their classes, with Naruto being the highest, but were waiting on a job for them to do. Silently, Gizmo went back to work trying to hack the Centauri computers. Elsewhere in the base, Naruto and Jinx had just stepped out of the elevator and were heading toward the rooms. It was late and both wanted to get some rest. As they passed the common room, they saw that no one was in it, indicating that Mammoth was asleep or at least somewhere else in the base. Although Naruto had a room in the hotel with rooms for all of them, they never actually used it, seeing as it was for their cover. As he and Jinx headed to their rooms, hers being right across the hall from his, he couldn't help feeling a bit nervous for some reason. As he made a sideways glance at Jinx as she appeared to be caught in her own thoughts. Naruto was about to walk into his room until he heard Jinx call him. When he turned around, however, he was surprised when Jinx quickly walked up to him and kissed him on the cheek. She then quickly turned around, unlocked her door and went inside. Naruto stood in the hall frozen for a while until he let out a silent chuckle. Turning back around, he walked up to his room door, then placing a hand on the door while pumping out some chakra. A seal appeared on the door before disappearing. Naruto had chosen to use seals to lock his door instead of locks, seeing as you couldn't just pick a seal. And seeing as he was the only person that he knew about that used chakra or even knew how to make those seals, he knew no one could get in his room. Suddenly there was a click as the door opened to let him in. Closing the door back, he instantly felt the seal reappear and locking the door back. Naruto had a room that most teenage boys would dream of. In the room was a large king-sized bed with blue coverings. There was a mahogany dresser to the left of the room, with a nightstand next to the bed. On the nightstand was a lamp with a white shade and 3 pictures. One of the pictures was of Team 7 over 6 years ago when they were all still innocent. Another was one of Naruto's most cherished pictures. There were 3 people in the picture, one a blonde man that looked like an older version of Naruto. The next person was a woman with red hair, though you couldn't see the color of her eyes because she had a large smile on her face and her eyes were closed. The last person on the picture was a tall man with long white hair. He had red lines running from his eyes, making it look like he was crying blood. These were Naruto's parents, Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, and Naruto's former sensei Jiraiya of the legendary Sannin. The last picture was one of the few he had taken while in the Hive Academy. It contained him wearing a black shirt with a pair of black pants. He also had on a pair of black tennis. Standing to his left was Jinx with a large blush on her face, and next to her stood a smiling Gizmo. To his right stood Kid Wicked, who looked sort of like a mini Batman and could travel through the shadows and other things with shadows. Right next to him was Seymour, a dark-colored kid who was wearing a white jumpsuit with a green belt around his waist. He wore a pair of black tennis with green at the bottom and blue lacens. He also wore a pair of green gloves on his hand. The oddest thing about him, though, was the blue helmet he wore with one large eye in the middle. Seymour's power was different visions like infrared, night vision, etc. Standing in the back of the group were 2 figures, both wearing black and gold, except one was bigger than the other. The smaller one had a shield strapped to his back and a large H was in the center of his chest. This was Private Hive. The other figure had long orange hair that came to his neck in length. You could see from his size that he was strong. This one was Mammoth. Also in Naruto's room was a 70-inch plasma TV in the wall, and in front of it were different kind of games. The wall of the room was a dark blue with pictures of different weapons hanging here and there. There were no visible doors in the room, which would make people believe this was the only room, but that wasn't the case. As Naruto walked over to the wall on his left, he performed a hand sign before a seal appeared on the wall. Instantly the wall opened, revealing a room behind it. This room was Naruto's weapons room. Anybody with a brain could have told you that if they saw it, seeing as the walls were lined with weapons. In the middle of the room was a large table with a chair where Naruto built his weapons. Silently he walked up to an empty spot on the wall. Naruto held out his hand and in a puff of smoke a gun that looked like a 9mm appeared in his hand, except this gun charged up his chakra and let it out in large pulses. Another reason he built his weapons was because no one else could use them unless you used chakra, and as far as he knew only him used chakra. Putting the gun back into its place, Naruto turned and left the room, closing the wall back in. Watching it reseal. Yet again Naruto walked to the wall that's right in front of the door. Once more he performed a hand sign and the wall opened. Walking inside the room, it was revealed to be a closet. Everything was neatly organized. Walking up to the section he knew held sleepwear, he quickly picked out a black pants and a red shirt. Naruto then turned around and walked out of the closet, watching as the wall sealed up again. Walking over to the wall that was on his right, Naruto did the routine to open the wall, and this time his private bath was revealed. Each room had one, so it wasn't a big deal. As Naruto started filling the tub with water, he started taking off his clothes. Seeing as the water had reached high enough, he turned off the faucet and got into the tub, relaxing his muscles. Across the hall, Jinx had leaned against the door until she heard Naruto go inside his room. She let out a quiet sigh before remembering what she had done moments ago. Her face instantly turned a deep red as the blood rushed to her cheeks. Jinx couldn't believe she had just kissed him, though only on the cheek. Jinx's room was a dark pink color, and unlike Naruto, she had pictures of her time at the Hive Academy all over the walls. Like Naruto, she also had a king-sized bed with pink coverings and a nightstand by her bed. She had a full-body mirror in the corner, and there were two doors, one leading into her closet and the other into her bathroom. On her nightstand was a lamp with pink shade and a picture. And she had a dresser on the right side of the had let each of them design their rooms how they wanted when he let them come live with him so that they could be more comfortable. She also had a 30-inch plasma TV in her room with a DVD player and a few movies. Jinx took off her clothes, leaving her in only her underwear, and climbed into bed. She had already took a shower and gone to bed until the receptionist called her and told her Naruto had returned like she asked her to. As she laid in bed, she couldn't help thinking of Naruto and the shocked look on his face when she had kissed her. She turned over on her bed and grabbed the picture off the nightstand. Surprisingly, it was the same one Naruto was looking at. She couldn't believe how much she was blushing just by standing next to Naruto, although that was a few months after he had first arrived. She placed the picture back on the nightstand before snuggling up under the covers and going back to sleep. She knew she would have a long day ahead of her. Back down in the lab, Gizmo was still trying to get into the Centauri computers to hack the video cameras. He wasn't having much luck, however, as the computers were revealed to be better than he thought. He kept trying though, just to make sure Naruto had an advantage. He might never really say it, but he was grateful to Naruto because he gave him a home and enough equipment to build whatever he wanted. Him and Naruto were the technicians of the group, though Naruto left most of the tech stuff to him. He knew Naruto could build things just as good if not better than him, and sometimes he even showed him where he could improve his designs. In 3 years Naruto had read tons of books on many subjects from all over the world, and thanks to his photographic memory he remembered everything he read. When they had graduated they had nowhere to go, but then Naruto had showed up and told them that they could stay with him. And it was for this reason that Gizmo didn't want to let Naruto down. He kept trying to hack the computers. He wouldn't give up no matter what. Back with Naruto, he had just finished his bath and was going to go to bed until his stomach grumbled. It was at that time he remembered that he had just returned from a mission and therefore had missed dinner. "I gotta get something to eat," he thought to himself. He turned around and started walking towards the door, but just as he was about to reach the door he disappeared in a yellow flash. Reappearing in the kitchen, he walked up to the cubeboard and took out some instant ramen. Then walking over to the stove he grabbed the tea kettle to see if it had any water inside. Luckily it was still half full. As he put the kettle back on the stove while turning on the burner and went to sit down at the table to wait for the water to heat. Once again Naruto's thoughts went back to when he had first arrived in this world and how much he had changed. Once again, Naruto was pulled from his thoughts as the kettle started letting out a loud whistle signaling that the water was hot. As he got up and poured the water into his ramen, he closed the lid back and waited for the noodles to become soft. After the 3 minutes wait he added the sauce, stirred it up, and once more sat at the table to eat. When he finished he got up and threw the container into the garbage. Once more Naruto disappeared in a yellow flash and appeared back in his room. Naruto then went into bed and fell asleep as his mind wandered back to his past, this time undisturbed. Okay folks, this is the end of chapter 2. Next chapter and maybe a few after that will be flashback chapters as Naruto sleeps, meaning that Naruto will be dreaming of his past. So that means I will reveal how Naruto got there, how he ended up in the hive, and a few of his abilities. Also chapter 3 won't be out until next week and I'll try to update weekly, so until then, see you later. How it began part 1. Okay folks, here's chapter 3 and as promised you will get to see how Naruto got with the hive and other mysteries. You will also get to see some of Naruto's jutsus and other techniques. Also anyone who has any questions or suggestions can leave them in a review. So let's get on with chapter 3. Disclaimer. Naruto and Teen Titans aren't mine, but I am trying to change that. Thought. Hello. Demon. Jutsu. Hello radio, phone etc. Hello talk. Hello. It was a forest and everything was quiet. Suddenly a blur shot past through the trees, with the only proof being the dropping leaves that were pulled from the trees by the figure's speed. As the figure stopped to catch a quick breath, it was revealed to be a blonde-haired male dressed in the normal Konoha Anbu armor with a white cloak opened up showing a black shinobi pants with a black long-sleeved shirt and a white vest on and a sword strapped to his back with a black and white diamond-patterned handle and a black sheath, his white cloak signifying that he was a captain in Anbu, and a white mask over his face with a picture of a fox. By the person's size you could tell that he was only about 14 or 15. As soon as the boy had caught his breath enough, he started his dash back to his home village. As he got closer to the village, the smell of smoke caught his nose. Stopping once more, the figure focused some chakra to his nose. He found that the smoke was coming from the north, the same direction his village was in. Seeing as he couldn't see much since the forest was so thick, the figure bent low before jumping extremely high into the air and over the trees. From this height he could easily see the village and all the smoke rising from it. He also noticed that a few places in the wall around his home were missing large chunks, meaning that something big had passed through the wall. As soon as the figure landed on the ground, he dashed forward, adding chakra to his feet to increase his speed more. When he reached the front of the gates, he jumped from inside the forest surrounding his home and ran through the gate. He immediately stopped in his tracks from the sight he saw. The entire village was nothing more than rubble except for a few buildings that were still standing, and even those looked like they were ready to fall, and there was fire and blood all around. Bodies of ninjas and civilians alike were thrown all over the place, some missing limbs and others too disfigured or burnt in some way to even recognize. The figure couldn't believe his eyes. He slowly pulled off his mask, revealing teary and disbelieving blue eyes and 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek, revealing the face of Naruto Uzumaki. The only other time he had ever seen the village in a state like this was a few months ago when Pain, the so-called leader of the organization, Akatsuki, had come looking for him and had destroyed the entire village, killing almost everyone in it. But even so, he knew it couldn't be anyone from Akatsuki, seeing as they had hunted them all down and killed them, and he had killed the real leader of the group, Madara Uchiha, with the Kyuubi's help. He even had each of their cloaks and rings, and H had 2 of Madara's masks. He had figured that in order to extract the bias from their hosts they needed the rings, so if you killed a member once they retrieved the rings they could recruit more. So he had started taking the rings and cloaks so that couldn't happen. Though he still didn't manage to save the 8 Tails Jinchuriki, seeing as he saved his life by letting the Akatsuki capture him, meaning that he was now the only Jinchuriki left. Who could have done this? He cried to himself, as he walked slowly through the village trying to see if he could find any survivors, though he doubted that. He walked to the spot where the Hokage building used to be and noticed the Hokage herself laying there dead. He walked next to the body and dropped to his knees next to it. He silently pulled the body, which was covered in blood, up into a hug. Ba-chan, he cried as he looked at the woman who was like a mother to him, now dead, in his arms. As he made as much shadow clones as he could, he slowly lifted the blonde Hokage up and started walking. The rest of the clones already knew what was going to happen, so they set out to do their jobs. They gathered all of the dead bodies from infants to old people and brought them to someplace that was cleared. There was the entire Rookie 9, all of his friends and people that he considered family, from Sakura to Konohamaru, all now dead, though some of the people looked like they had their clothes ripped off. As they laid the bodies of all the people from the village down side by side, the clones backed off. Saying a silent prayer, Naruto and his clones began to form hand signs. Earth. Style. Swamp of the underworld jutsu. shouted Naruto and his clones at the same time, instantly burying the people of his village. As Naruto was about to start crying again, a clone appeared next to him with something in his hands and a pissed look on his face. Not even saying a word, Naruto took the item from the clone before unrolling it. He immediately had a look just like his clones plastered on his face. The item was revealed to be what looked like human skin, except it was pale and had long black hair hanging from its head. Around the holes for the eyes were purple marks. Naruto instantly knew who did this. Orochimaru. He growled. Suddenly he heard a voice behind him. "Hello Naruto-kun, it's been so long since we last saw each other," the voice said. Naruto recognized the voice and instantly spun. Around his eyes opened wide. Standing in front of him was a boy of about 16 with raven black hair stopping at his chin. He wore a black baggy pants that stopped to his ankles and a purple rope tied around his waist. He wore a large white shirt with the front opened a bit showing his chest. On his feet were a pair of black sandals and he had on a pair of elbow-length black gloves. Strapped to his waist slightly behind him was a sword that didn't have a hilt and was white with a black line running through the sheath and the handle. The most surprising thing about the figure though was his eyes. Unlike normal eyes, the boy's eyes were red with 3 black comma marks, in each forming a circular pattern and the normal white around it. "It seems that you have managed to make Anbu caption as well, though the last time I saw you, you were a genin," the boy said with a sick grin on his face. Naruto recognized the boy, but he knew that he didn't act like this. Instantly recognition came to his eyes. This wasn't Sasuke Uchiha anymore, this was Orochimaru in Sasuke's body. Which pissed Naruto off even more. "Orochimaru, you bastard," shouted the blonde. "How the fuck could you do this to your own village?" asked the blonde. Orochimaru in Sasuke's body just chuckled before replying. "This hasn't been my village in years and you know that," replied Orochimaru. "But if you mean how could I kill everyone, then that's simple," said Orochimaru before snapping his fingers. Instantly at least 300 ninjas appeared surrounding the blonde Anbu caption. Naruto cursed himself for not sensing them earlier, though he wasn't expecting the people who did this to still be here. "You see, I created my own army just for this," said Orochimaru. It was at this time that Naruto noticed something before letting out a gasp of shock. Each one of these shinobi had a curse mark on them, allowing him to figure out how Orochimaru still had so much men left. Orochimaru seeing that Naruto had noticed the curse marks chuckled again. "I see you noticed," said Orochimaru. Naruto knew that the village wouldn't stand a chance against this much curse mark powered ninjas unless they had 2 of the Sanins and him. "You see, I had a spy watching the village for a while to see when you would be gone long enough for me to make my attack, and luckily you got that assassination mission that took you all the way to Kiri. After all, I know that if you were here then you would have made things too difficult and would have fucked up all my plans. After all, the person who killed Madara and most of the Akatsuki is not to be taken lightly, and add the fact that you're the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki and have gained some sort of control over its power, or so my spies have said, then that would have made my plans impossible. But don't think I didn't reward my army for their services. I let them have fun with the women of this pathetic village before they killed them. You should have heard their screams as they were raped, especially that Hyuga friend of yours. She was a real screamer, right men?" said Orochimaru. Orochimaru's army yelled in agreement and some chuckling evilly, remembering the fun they had with all the women of the village. Naruto couldn't believe what he had just heard. That explained why some of the villagers' clothes looked like they were ripped off. They had been raped and he couldn't help them because he wasn't there. He instantly felt rage build up inside of him, rage that he had never felt before. Not only had everyone in his village died, but some of their last moments were spent being raped by men, and some women that they didn't even know. Naruto looked up with rage in his eyes to see Orochimaru's army still talking about the fun they had with the villagers, with Orochimaru standing in the front with an evil grin on his face staring at him. "Oh come now Naruto-kun, don't look at me like that, I might get the impression that you don't like me. But seeing that you are in so much pain, I'll let my men end your life quick," said Orochimaru. He was going to give the order until he heard Naruto speak. "Shut up you bastard, I'm going to kill your entire army, then I'll kill you nice and slow," said the blonde with pure malice in his voice. It was at that time Naruto entered his mindscape. Naruto's mindscape looked like a sewer with a bunch of hallways going off into different areas. Any other person would get lost in this maze, but Naruto had been in here enough times to know exactly which way to go. He quickly walked down certain corridors until he reached a large room with a giant cage in it with a piece of paper in the middle of the cage with the kanji for seal on it. He walked up to the bars before shouting out, "Kyuubi, I know that you're aware of what's going on. I came to make a deal with you." Something inside the cage started to stir before two giant red slitted eyes opened. "I am listening, Gaki," replied a deep voice. Naruto quickly told Kyuubi his deal. "I'll release you from the seal and all you'll have to do is make sure everyone who destroyed my home dies," Naruto said with anger and grief in his voice. The Kyuubi thought about it before replying. No. Naruto couldn't believe it. The Kyuubi who always asked him to free him was denying a chance to be free. "What?" Naruto shouted. "I thought you wanted to be free, and now that you have a chance you're not taking it," he asked. "How could you not take it?" he asked. Kyuubi just sat there and looked at the blonde before replying. "It's not that I don't want to be free, it's just that it's too late for me to be resealed from you," said the Biju. Naruto just stood there looking confused before asking, "What do you mean it's too late?" the boy asked. The Kyuubi looked irritated before deciding to answer the blonde. "I mean that even if I wanted to be free I couldn't, seeing that our souls are almost completely fused. And that would mean that if you die then I die even if you remove the seal." Naruto was shocked. He didn't know the seal was fusing their souls together. Then a look of fear came on his face. "Does that mean that you and I were going to become one?" he asked the beast. Kyuubi just shook his head negatively before replying, "No, it just means that when you die I die, but don't worry, you and me, we're never going to become one." Naruto sighed in relief, but then he remembered what was going on. "I can't take all those curse mark powered ninja by myself, and seeing that I can't let you out either, that means I'll have to take out as much as I can before they kill me," said the boy silently. Kyuubi watched as the boy was about to turn around before he made a decision. He didn't want to see the Gaki die. He had started to like him a bit. And add the fact that he wasn't ready to die yet either solidified his decision. "Hold on, Gaki, I might have a solution to this, but you might not like it," said the fox. Naruto curiously looked at the fox before asking, "What kind of solution?" he asked. "Simple," replied the fox. "The same thing we were just talking about." Naruto thought about what they were talking about before he realized Kyuubi's plan. "You want us to fuse with each other?" he asked. "Yes," said Kyuubi. "By doing this you will have access to half of my power and still be in complete control. You will also become a Hanyu though, and it may be painful when your body changes." Naruto looked at the beast before asking, "What do you get out of this?" Kyuubi was expecting him to ask this and he just replied, "I get to live longer and I get to watch you rip Orochimaru and his pathetic army to shreds." Naruto thought about it before asking, "What will happen to me?" The Kyuubi then answered, "Simple, you would become stronger, faster, and I'll give you my brain capacity so that you will also be smarter and you will gain my abilities like telekinetic powers, and to sweeten the deal I'll give you something I had in what you could call my past life," said the fox. Naruto looked a bit skeptic before asking, "How much brain capacity could you have?" Kyuubi looked at him before chuckling and then answered, "I am smarter than you would think and my brain capacity is so great that I have gained telepathic abilities, hence the reason I can talk without moving my mouth," he replied. Naruto just nodded his head before asking one last question. "You said I would get something you had in your former life. Does that mean you died, and what is it?" Kyuubi only said that he would have to wait and find out what it was, but never answered the question about him dying. Naruto thought about the Kyuubi's deal for a while before coming to a decision. "I accept your deal as long as I'm able to wipe that sick smile off that Tami's face." The Kyuubi smiled before telling Naruto what to do. "Okay, Gaki, the first thing you need to do is halfway take off the seal, then lay on the floor and prepare to experience the most painful thing that has ever happened to you." After Naruto had halfway taken off the seal, he went and laid on the floor. The Kyuubi then sent his chakra through the bars of the cell. The chakra surrounded Naruto and then suddenly it formed some sort of seal on the floor that was glowing with Naruto in the center. Suddenly the seal on the floor moved toward Naruto and started sticking to his skin, covering him in seals. Then the pain started. The Kyuubi was right, this was the most painful thing that he had ever felt. Outside of Naruto's mindscape, Orochimaru had thought that Naruto had given up since he wasn't moving. Again he was going to give the order for his men to kill him until he felt a powerful surge of chakra coming from the boy. The chakra was becoming visible now and he watched as Naruto started shaking. Suddenly he heard a crack, which sounded like bone breaking, and he looked at Naruto and was surprised by the sight before him. He watched as Naruto started smoking and suddenly all of his skin started melting off, followed by all his muscles. Soon the only thing left showing on the boy was his organs, and Orochimaru could see his heart beating extremely fast. Orochimaru watched as Naruto's skeleton started to stretch, making him a few inches taller, and his teeth started lengthening. He watched in plain horror as Naruto's organs seemed to get a little bigger. After that he watched as all the muscles started to grow back, except he could see that they were more packed and stronger than any normal human muscles could ever become. He then watched as the skin started to grow back, revealing that it now had a nice tannish look to it. Then his hair started growing back, but instead of just blonde it had stripes of red in between, almost making it look like his head was on fire. His ears had also become slightly pointed, though no one would actually notice them. The blonde didn't move, however, which gave Orochimaru his chance to make his order. He looked behind him to see that his entire army had a look of fear and disgust on their faces. He quickly took charge and knocked his army out of their trance. "Kill him!" he shouted, and immediately everyone took out kunais and shuriken and threw them at the boy. Orochimaru was smirking, thinking that he would finally kill the boy that always messed up his plans. Orochimaru's victory was cut short, however, by what happened next. Inside Naruto's mindscape, he was screaming his head off from the pain. Sure, he had been warned, but he wasn't expecting it to be this bad. As he felt the pain start to subside, he heard the Kyuubi speak. "It's done now. You should be able to handle Orochimaru like this, though I will have to give you some more training to control your newfound strength and speed." Naruto slowly began to stir before sitting up, or at least trying to. Immediately he felt a rush of pain before he dropped back down. "Don't worry, that should stop soon," he heard the Kyuubi say. Naruto could only nod his head before looking at the beast. Instantly he noticed the Kyuubi was smaller. "What happened to you?" he asked. Kyuubi just looked at him before replying. "I don't have all of my power, since your father only sealed half of it in you and the other half he sealed somewhere else for you to get when you were ready, though I don't know where." Naruto only nodded his head. He already knew about his parents and everything else, and he also knew where the next half of Kyuubi's power was sealed. Tsunade had taken him to where all of his parents' belongings were, but he wasn't ready to get them yet. "That can be solved," replied the blonde. Kyuubi's eyes instantly shot open in surprise. "You know where it is?" he asked. "Yeah, I'll get it after I finish with Orochimaru Teme," was the blonde's reply. Finally feeling the pain stop, Naruto once more tried to sit up, and this time he was successful. He looked down at the water in front of him and immediately noticed all the changes. He noticed the stronger muscles, the different colored hair, and everything. As soon as Naruto noticed, he looked up at the Kyuubi. "You were right. I feel amazing and stronger than I've ever been in my life, though I don't notice your presence anywhere." Kyuubi smiled inwardly before telling Naruto what to do. "Channel chakra to your eyes and you'll see them," he replied. Naruto did as he was told and felt something strange happen to his eyes. As he looked at the Kyuubi again, he noticed it looked like he was moving in slow motion. He could also somehow tell where the tail swinging behind the Kyuubi was going to go before they even moved. Looking into the water, he instantly noticed what it was. His eyes, which before were a blue color, was now red with a swirling design of some sort in it. He knew immediately what it was. The famed eyes of the Uchiha clan, the legendary Sharingan eyes, though these were its last and most powerful state. The Mangekyo Sharingan, the most powerful state of the Sharingan, though these weren't like any of the others he had seen. He looked at the Kyuubi with surprise in his eyes, but the fox just had a sly smirk on his lips. "How?" was Naruto's only question. "Don't worry about that," replied the fox. "Just go out there and rip that snake bastard apart." As soon as he said that, Naruto got an evil grin on his face. "With pleasure, though I want you to do me a favor," replied the blonde. Kyuubi looked at him before. "Sure, what is it?" Naruto then told him what he wanted. "I want you to put a genjutsu around my eyes so that Orochimaru won't see them, and after this is all over I'm going to give you control over my body for a while. I want you to take me as far away from here as you can." Kyuubi shook his head as a yes before Naruto turned around and walked down the corridor before disappearing. On the outside world, Orochimaru's army had just thrown tons of kunai and shuriken at the blonde when something unexpected happened. The weapons were only inches away from the blonde before his eyes popped open. Immediately all the weapons stopped in midair. Naruto got up from his position on the ground and looked at the ninjas around him. He noticed a look of fear and surprise on all their faces. He then looked at the person he hated the most, Orochimaru the Snake Sannin. Naruto just smirked before looking at the weapons floating around him. He knew that he didn't know how to use his telekinetic abilities or his elemental control abilities yet, so he knew it must have been the Kyuubi's doing. You can thank me later for this. I am going to help you out with controlling the elements for now until I get the chance to train you in how to do it yourself. Naruto inwardly nodded his head in thanks to the Kyuubi before raising his right hand with his fist closed. You took away everything that was precious to me, started the blonde in a deeper voice than normal, so now I will take away your lives. All the ninja there were scared by the power the blonde ninja was showing before one got brave. Yeah right, there's 300 of us and only one of you, and not to mention that we have been gifted with Orochimaru-sama's new curse marks, shouted the ninja. This got all the other ninjas riled back up as they remembered the odds and the power they had, completely ignoring the fact that he had stopped their weapons barrage without even moving a finger, and the fact that those weapons were still floating around him. Hearing the ninja speak and seeing him encourage the others made Naruto look at him and smirk. Nice speech. You managed to get them all riled up again, meaning this won't be as boring as I thought. Unfortunately, though, I'll have to kill you first. Before anyone could even say a word, one of the kunais spun around in the air before flying back towards the on that spoke, going through his neck and killing him instantly. Naruto then looked at the rest of the ninja surrounding him before screaming, "You all die here." Then, without warning, Naruto lashed out with the weapons. Okay, I'll end it here for now. I'm sorry about the late update, but school just reopened and the homework is insane. Next chapter will be Naruto vs Orochimaru and the rest of his army and the continuation of what happened. So until next tome, see you later, and please R&R. How it began part 2. Alright everyone, I'm back with chapter 4. Okay, I got 2 reviews last chapter that said I need to space out the paragraphs more and make them a little shorter because it's hard to find where you were if something distracts you. I've checked the chapters and I agree. It's not that my writing's bad or anything, just that my chapters are too long, and for that, my dear readers, I'm sorry. So from now on I'll make shorter chapters. Also to Hades 252-2, I know everything about Naruto's seal, and I know that Kyuubi is a being made of chakra, but everything I do in this story I do for a reason. In order for my story to work, I had to make Kyuubi a demon, which technically he is, seeing that he came from the Jubi. So anything you see me do in this story that isn't true to either Naruto or Teen Titans, I did it for a reason, and the reason will be revealed. So now that I've said what I had to, let's get on with the story. Disclaimer. If I owned Naruto or Teen Titans, then I wouldn't have been writing this story now, would I? Thought. Hello. Demon. Jutsu. Hello. Radio, phone, etc. Hello. Talk. Hello. Scene change. XXXXXX. The ninja didn't even know what happened. 1 minute they were listening to one of their own give a quick speech of encouragement to them, and then the next minute he was dead, with a hole in his neck. Before any of the other ninjas could even react, all the weapons that were floating around the blonde shot out like bullets, taking out every ninja on the front line in a couple seconds, which was at least 50 ninjas. The rest of the ninja, finally realizing what was going on, looked at the blonde, some with hatred because of the possible friend and family he had just killed, and some with fear seeing the power of the boy again. Orochimaru stood by his army with only hate in his eyes. He thought the kid might just give up when he returned, seeing everything he held dear destroyed and having no other reason to fight, but instead it seemed that he had totally pissed the kid off. Instead of giving up, the kid had gotten stronger, and only in a few seconds. Add the fact that it seemed he could stop their weapons without even moving, and you had a big problem on your hands. Looking at his men, he repeated his order one last time. Kill him. He shouted, and so did his army. Instantly jutsu started getting thrown at the blonde. Naruto looked around and everything appeared to be moving in slow motion. It was obvious Kyuubi had done as promised, since he looked right at Orochimaru and he didn't seem to notice his Mangekyo Sharingan copying all the jutsus thrown at him before he dodged the jutsus. As Naruto turned around, he saw a ninja performing hand signs with him copying them with ease. As soon as the ninja was finished, Naruto heard him shout the name of his jutsu. Fire Style. Grand Fireball Jutsu. Naruto just stood there with a smirk on his face as the large fireball got closer. When it was right up to him, Naruto lifted his left hand and made it look like he caught the fireball, stopping it in its tracks. Naruto's smirk grew wider before he spoke. "Don't play with fire or you're bound to get burned," he said before he pushed his hand forward, sending the fireball back with twice the speed it had come at him with. The ninja, not expecting this, didn't have time to dodge as the fireball hit him and exploded, catching two more ninjas and killing them instantly. The rest of ninjas surrounded him instantly, angrier now more than ever. He watched as they each started up a jutsu, with him copying each and every one thanks to his Sharingan. As the different jutsus hit the spot Naruto was standing at, all the ninjas started cheering, thinking they had finally killed him. They were surprised, however, when they heard a voice shout out behind them. "You're all pathetic excuses for shinobi," the voice shouted, which pissed the ninjas off even more. Spinning around the army, and Orochimaru saw Naruto standing behind them without even a scratch on him. He looked completely bored. "If this is the best you idiots have, then I guess I better finish this," he said. "But don't think I won't make it extremely painful for each and every one of you for what you've done," he finished. "Okay, I've had enough of this, little fuck," shouted one of the ninjas before he started transforming. He grew a few feet before his body started to turn a grayish color. His muscles then started expanding, making them bigger, and his teeth and nails lengthened and got sharper. His ankles then snapped backwards, making them look like they were in the wrong direction. Following that, the mon's mouth started to stretch out, giving him the mouth of an animal. He then dropped down on his hands and knees before the bones of his spine started stretching out, coming from his back, making it look like he had spikes on his back. Altogether, the man was now a complete monster. Seeing their comrade change, most of the others started to as well, changing into monstrous figures. The few, which were about 20, that hadn't changed only smirked along with Orochimaru. Naruto, however, didn't even seem bothered by the ninja's transformations, but instead he was looking at his nails as if he was bored. Feeling annoyed, all the monsters attacked the blonde, with the ones who hadn't changed staying back and looking for openings to attack. They were sure their comrades would rip the little annoying bastard to shreds. Oh, how wrong they were. As the first monster rushed the blonde and tried to jump on him, he was immediately grabbed from the air by his throat. Naruto stood holding the larger beast up in the air with one hand and didn't even seem to be trying. Looking at the beast in his hand, Naruto just shook his head in disappointment. All these men and women had turned themselves into monsters just to get power. Sure, he had done the same thing in a way, but he had done it to avenge his village and all the people that were tormented, so that they may rest in peace in the afterlife. Once more looking at the beast in his hand, Naruto just drew back his right hand before sending it forward. He watched as his hand punched straight through the beast's chest, destroying its heart and leaking black-colored blood. He watched as after he dropped the beast, it started turning into the man it was before. The rest of the monsters roared in outrage before rushing the blonde altogether. Just as they were about to reach him, a few earth spikes rose from the ground, taking out about 10 of the beasts by piercing them through the heart and injuring some that didn't manage to dodge in time, though he saw the wounds were healing. Once more the beasts charged, and Naruto decided to use them for a little bit of practice. He concentrated before holding out his right hand. As soon as he did this, one of the beasts charging him was lifted into the air by an unseen force. Naruto looked at the beast, smirking before closing his opened fists. The beast was instantly crushed, which caused blood to start raining down on some of the others, but they didn't pay it any mind. Orochimaru stood watching his army get completely owned by the blonde Jinchuriki. To say he was pissed would be like saying that Jiraiya was a pervert, which would be an understatement. He was completely furious. He had planned everything out perfectly, at least in his opinion. He would make an army of Kursumark-wielding ninja, then wait till Naruto had left the village for a long enough time period and attack. After they had finished destroying the village, he would wait for Naruto to return to see his new body and realize it was too late to save his friends. And lastly, he would let his army kill Naruto, and thus destroy the Hidden Leaf village completely. But instead he had pissed off the blonde. Then he had gotten power that Orochimaru only dreamed of having in a few seconds, and was now destroying his army with apparent ease. Let's just say this wasn't his day. Looking at the blonde, he hoped his army would be able to tire him out enough to finish him off, but he highly doubted that. He had a feeling That this wasn't all the power the blonde had, and he was right. Naruto didn't know it, but Kyuubi was holding most of the chakra back for a reason. Orochimaru would never admit it, but right now he was completely terrified. Naruto was winning and he hadn't even so much as used a jutsu yet. Orochimaru really wanted to see what this power boost would do to Naruto's jutsu, but the blonde wasn't using any. He continued to watch as his army was taken down one by one. An army the largest of the 5 great nations couldn't beat was now being slaughtered by one man, no one boy, and it was completely frustrating. How did he get this power? Thought Orochimaru. Is this the Kyuubi's doing or something else? He wondered. He would have kept trying to come to a conclusion about these events, but he was interrupted as one of his men's body came flying at him, completely split in half. Thanks to years of experience, he was able to dodge and finally looked at the battle to see what was going on. What he saw he didn't like. His men were still falling like flies, and he knew that he and Naruto would have their battle. Back with Naruto, he was dodging and killing monsters all around. So far he had taken out at least half of Orochimaru's army and didn't even feel winded. This isn't even half of your power, he heard a voice say before his eyes popped open. This isn't even half, so how much is it? He asked disbelievingly. He heard the Kyuubi make a small hum noise before replying. This is about 20% you have for now, though I'm holding the rest back from fusing with you. Naruto was both shocked and confused. This was only 20% of his power and the Kyuubi was holding the rest back. He instantly asked the Kyuubi why he was holding back the chakra. Kyuubi was silent for a while before answering. I was going to just let all the chakra fuse with you from the beginning, but after I found out you know where the second half of my power was, I stopped the chakra from fusing completely. That still doesn't answer my question, replied Naruto while ducking under one of the monsters, spinning around making a complete turn while dodging the beast. Well, it's really simple, started the Kyuubi. Do you know what happens to a balloon with air? He asked, getting a nod from the blonde. Good, then you know that the balloon grows to hold the air, right? He asked once more, getting a nod from the blonde. Then you also know that by putting too much air into a balloon it bursts, right? He asked, getting a final nod from the blonde. Well, the reason I'm holding back your chakra and sending continuous fluxes of chakra is so that your chakra coils won't get used to having that amount of power running through it. But I still don't see why you have to do that, replied Naruto. The Kyuubi sighed before replying. If your chakra coils get used to having that certain amount of chakra running through them, then later when you try to absorb the next half of my chakra. Kyuubi didn't get to finish, however, as Naruto used his newfound genius to figure it out himself. If I try to fill my chakra coils more than they are reused, then I'll be just like the rubber balloon and blow myself up because I couldn't hold the extra chakra, thus killing both of us from the inside out, he replied. The Kyuubi just smirked before replying with a simple, yup. Naruto now realized why Kyuubi was holding back power, so that he could handle the extra chakra later. He silently thanked the fox, and the fox replied by saying, no problem, just hurry this up so that we can get our full power. No problem, I just need you to keep up the genjutsu till I'm finished RD with Orochi team's army and help me with a bit more nature manipulation and I should be finished in no time, replied Naruto. The Kyuubi just nodded before Naruto cut their mental link, now focusing on the battle. Naruto dashed at the beasts with incredible speed, grabbing one before jumping on its shoulder, gripping its head and pulling. The head instantly separated from the body, leaving a headless core on the floor. Looking at the rest of them, he said, sorry I have to end this so quickly, but I have things to deal with. Orochimaru and everyone else watched as Naruto disappeared into thin air. He then appeared a few feet away by where his katana had flown to. Picking the blade up, Naruto once more disappeared. A couple miles away from the village, a few Suna shinobi could be seen running full speed towards Konoha. It appears that Tsunade had sent a messenger hawk to Suna asking for help after finding out Orochimaru were heading their way with an army. Although she only asked for a few, seeing that she wasn't expecting everyone in Orochimaru's army to have curse marks, she thought that they would be able to win easily and had only asked for enough ninja from Suna to act as a cleanup crew, taking out any other ninja that they didn't manage to and to help them rebuild whatever was damaged. She knew it would take them at least 3 days to reach the village and thought by the time they should have already won, with Orochimaru's plan failing. She was only right about the fight being over, however, but the Hidden Leaf village hadn't won. In the group of ninja were Temari, Kankuro and Baki along with a few other ninja. They had been assigned this mission by Gaara, who couldn't come himself seeing as he was the Kazekage and had responsibilities to deal with. He had sent some of his best ninja however to help out Konoha in their fight. As soon as he got the message from Tsunade 3 days ago, he had called for the ninja to go help out. He had explained the urgency of the mission as well and had told his ninja to be ready for a fight. Baki, who was leading the group, dashed from tree to tree with the rest of his platoon following him. They were only a few miles away from the village and wanted to hurry up so they could get some of the action. Back with Naruto, he was literally cutting Orochimaru's army in half. Every time he disappeared, he would reappear and cut one of Orochimaru's men in half either vertically, horizontally or any other way, and using all sorts of nature manipulation from fireballs he held in his hand to what looked like lightning shooting from his hands. He was also using his nature manipulation on his sword, covering it with lightning or whatever other element he decided to use. He was taking them out so fast that they didn't even have time to hit the ground before another was killed. Orochimaru could only watch as his army was cut down. Thanks to him having Sasuke's Sharingan, he could see where Naruto was going, but just barely. He knew that Sasuke was fast, and since he was in Sasuke's body it meant he was fast, but he knew he was nowhere near as fast as Naruto was going. Seeing his army was almost gone, Orochimaru closed his eyes and started gathering chakra to his eyes in order to use the Mangekyo Sharingan. Soon there was only one ninja left between Naruto and Orochimaru. This ninja was in its curse-mark state. As Naruto stared the beast down, he waited until the beast rushed him and didn't have to wait long. The beast took off with an impressive amount of speed, but it was nothing compared to Naruto's intense speed. Naruto just stood and waited until the beast was making a punch for his head. Spinning around the beast, Naruto used his sword to slice its legs clean off. As the beast dropped to the ground, Naruto walked up behind it. The beast flipped over, now laying on his back, and watched the boy walk closer. The beast did the only thing it could. It growled at the blonde, which didn't do much. Naruto walked up to the beast silently and slowly. Seeing the beast turn itself over from its face-down position on the floor, he raised one hand. Suddenly sparks of electricity started coming from his arm. The electricity gathered at the point of his index finger and started to make a ball about the size of a marble. Though it was small, Naruto knew it had a lot of power inside it. Naruto looked at the monster in front of him before saying 3 words, "Rot in hell," before the ball of electricity shot from his finger and towards the beast's chest. It tore through with ease, ripping the beast's entire chest section off of its body. Naruto watched as the beast slumped back dead before transforming back into a man with black hair and a good build. Looking around, Naruto saw that the only person left for him to kill was Orochimaru, who had his eyes closed. Naruto, using his Sharingan, saw that Orochimaru was channeling more chakra to his eyes and automatically knew what he was doing. Before he could try to stop him, however, Orochimaru's eyes shot open, revealing his, or rather Sasuke's, Mangekyo Sharingan. Orochimaru let out an insane laugh before looking at Naruto. "Prepare to die by my hands, fool. You can't kill an immortal, and now that I have these eyes I'm invincible," he said once more, laughing. He would have continued if he hadn't noticed Naruto chuckling. "What are you so happy about? I'm going to kill you right here with the help of my eyes." Naruto just kept on laughing before mentally talking to Kyuubi. "You can release the genjutsu now," he said while closing his eyes. "You want to know why I'm so happy? Well, let me tell you. You're not the only one with a surprise," he said while opening his eyes, which now had his Mangekyo Sharingan visible as well. Orochimaru was now more shocked and scared as ever. He had thought that he could use his Sharingan to win, but then Naruto goes and pulls one out as well. This was more than he could take for one day. He now wanted to kill the kid more than ever, then study his body to help himself become stronger. He was knocked out of his thoughts, however, when Naruto spoke. "Let's finish this once and for all, you bastard." Orochimaru would normally have something to say, but this time chose to stay quiet and prepare for the battle to come. The two ninjas stood there glaring hatefully at each other before dashing towards one another, intent on ending the other's life. At the same time as Naruto had taken down the last of Orochimaru's army, the Suna shinobi had arrived at the village. Walking through the gate, they immediately stopped. The entire village was destroyed and there didn't seem to be any survivors. The Suna ninja were about to look around before they felt chakra nearby. Immediately they dashed towards the source. When they arrived they saw someone with red and blonde hair wearing Enbu armor shoot a blast of electricity through what appeared to be the last member of Orochimaru's army's chest. They then watched as the blonde, red-haired person looked towards a next figure who was standing there. They instantly recognized the figure as Sasuke Uchiha. They watched as the two said a few words to one another, but being too far away they couldn't hear what it was. They then watched as the two figures just stood there looking at each other and immediately knew what they were doing. Okay, I'm going to end it here for now. I know I said that THS would have Naruto versus Orochimaru and his army, but then I had a better idea. Why not stop it when the two were about to fight and ended there, so next chapter I can show you all a complete Sharingan battle between Naruto and Orochimaru. I'm going to try and write an epic battle between the two and might even add in a Kyuubi showing up moment. Okay, for the reviewers who told me to space the chapters, I want to hear what you think. I also know that I haven't put much Teen Titans, but let me tell you that after these flashback chapters the rest will be about the TTs. Okay. So until next time, see ya later and please review. P.S. I might start up a poll soon and you'll be able to see what for. I hope that a lot of you vote, and also I know that I haven't described Naruto's Mangekyo all that well, so I'll put the picture of it up as my profile picture for a while, so if you want to know how it looks check out my profile. Sharingan battle. Okay, sorry for the late update, but I was trying to think of two separate ways for this story to go. The reason being whatever you my readers choose in my polls. The first poll is up and I'll take it down by the end of the week to put up my second poll, which will mostly decide the way the story goes. So since I have nothing else to say, let's get on with Chapter 5 of Naruto. Titan Rising. This is my longest chapter so far and I hope you like it. Disclaimer. If I had owned any of these shows then Naruto would have been a lot smarter. Robin would be less serious, Hinata would have confessed her feelings a long time ago, and Beast Boy would have a cool moped, but I don't so. Thought. Hello Demon. Large Summon. Jutsu. Hello Radio, Phone etc. Hello Talk. Hello. Scene change. XXXXXXXXXXXXX Konoha. As the two shinobi dashed at each other, Orochimaru started forming hand signs. Earth style. Earth spear jutsu. He shouted, which immediately caused spears of earth to jump out of the ground and try to impale the blonde, but Naruto used quick reflexes and speed to dodge all of them while still running towards Orochimaru. As Naruto drew nearer he started going through some hand signs for one of his newly acquired jutsu, pumping a lot of chakra into it to make it even stronger. Fire style. Dragon fire jutsu. He shouted, shooting an extremely large wave of fire from his mouth. The flames were at least 100 feet tall and about half as wide. Orochimaru couldn't help but marvel the power behind the attack. Even he knew that he didn't have enough chakra in his body to use the jutsu on that magnitude. Though he was marveling the jutsu's power, that didn't stop him from coming up with a way to defend himself. Earth style. Earth mud wall jutsu. He shouted over the roaring flames. Instantly he spat a glob of earth out of his mouth in a circular pattern around him, and as soon as it touched the ground it rose into a hard wall all around him. But he knew that this wasn't going to stop the devastating technique heading towards him, so he started forming more hand signs. Earth style. Twin decapitation jutsu. He said while silently sinking into the ground. Naruto had finally stopped his jutsu after a few seconds. He had seen Orochimaru summon the earth wall and he was sure that he knew that it didn't stand a chance against his jutsu. Naruto started trying to sense where the snake had gone and found him underground. He jumped out of the way quickly as Orochimaru tried to grab him. He knew that the battle could have been over a long time ago, but he wanted to make Orochimaru suffer. He had come to a decision. He would completely destroy Orochimaru and make him beg for death. He quickly let out a pulse of chakra, destroying the genjutsu that both fighters had the other in, to reveal both of them still standing in the same places they were before. Orochimaru knew that he didn't have much more power left. After all, the Mangekyo is a powerful dojutsu that requires a lot of chakra. When he saw Naruto break the genjutsus, then he knew that he was getting serious and was ready to end their fight. Orochimaru, however, wasn't stupid. He knew a straight-up fight with the boy in front of him would lead to his demise, so instead he decided to use his new pet. Orochimaru quickly started forming more hand signs, and Naruto, recognizing the sequence, started performing the same set. He didn't need his Sharingan for this since he had used these hand signs many times. Both of them finished their hand signs at the same time while shouting summoning jutsu and slamming their hand on the floor. Seals spread out on the ground where their hands had hit before there were two identical large puffs of smoke. From the direction Orochimaru was in you could hear a hissing sound before the smoke cleared away, revealing a giant 100 feet tall purple snake with a Sharingan pattern on its head. He also had two horns of sword poking out from his head and had two large fangs dripping poison in his mouth. "Let me introduce you to Manda too," shouted Orochimaru. Since Sasuke caused the original's death, Kabuto took it upon himself to clone him and make a stronger, faster, all-around better and more respectful one. "And this one follows every one of my orders without question or demands," he finished saying. He was waiting for Gamabunta so that he could finally kill the giant toad, but what appeared from the smoke shocked and startled him. The Suna ninja and Manda and even Naruto and Kyuubi, though they weren't scared, just confused. As the smoke cleared, it didn't reveal a giant toad. Instead it revealed a large 150-foot fox. The fox had the darkest black fur that anyone had ever seen with ruby-red slitted eyes, and he also had on a black coat with the kanji for shadow on the back in red. The fox looked confused for a while before looking around and growling. "Who of this pathetic world has dared to summon me?" he shouted, the power behind it letting off a slight shockwave. Naruto, finally getting to his senses, jumped onto the fox's nose and looked directly into its eyes, since he was too small to look in both, before replying without a single hint of fear because he knew that he could cancel the summoning if things went wrong. Naruto quickly looked over the fox's face and watched as the fox looked over him with anger clear in his eyes. Naruto, seeing enough, decided to speak. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, and it was I who summoned you, though I don't know how, since I never signed the fox summoning contract. Heck, I didn't even know there was one," he finished as the fox continued looking at him. Just when he was about to send the fox back, it spoke. "You smell of Kyuubi-sama's power, though I know for a fact that he was sealed almost 16 years ago in human time. So tell me, was it you he was sealed into?" he asked, and got a nod from the blonde. "I see. Then the power I am sensing is coming from you. That explains how you were able to summon me." The fox continued, but seeing as the boy on his nose still looked confused, he decided to explain. "We Kitsune have always been followers of Kyuubi-sama, and we were always ready to serve him. He could summon us at any time, and that's how we liked it. After all, with someone like Kyuubi-sama protecting us, none of the other summon clans would even dare to attack us." "So you were like the Kyuubi's minions?" asked the fiery-haired boy. "Yes. You can say that, and by the smell of your power you have fused with Kyuubi-sama, making both of you one entity, so that would mean Kyuubi-sama is no more," finished the fox. "Actually, Kyuubi is still in my head. We became one entity, but we are still two separate minds," said Naruto. The fox looked surprised before chuckling lightly. Kyuubi-sama was never one to just lay down and accept death. "But even though you are two separate minds, you are still one entity, meaning I will follow your orders as well, Namikaze-sama." Seeing this, Naruto couldn't help but smirk before realizing that he didn't even know the fox's name. "What may I call you, my fox friend?" he asked. The fox was shocked before realizing that he hadn't introduced himself. "My name is Nox Umbra, Nightshade in Latin. Namikaze-sama, and I am the third in charge of the Kitsune clan," he replied. "Well, Nox Umbra, I summoned you here to help me in this lil fight. I was going to summon the Toad Boss, but I think that you'll handle this just fine. What I want you to do is distract or kill that giant snake over there," he said. "With pleasure, after all, snake is one of a fox's favorite meals," he replied while licking his lips, and Naruto jumped off of the fox. Instantly the fox bent low, looking ready to pounce, and let out a large roar before the shadows all around jumped into the air, making a dome around the fighters and the Suna nin, and everything was covered in darkness. Naruto now realized why he had his name. Though everything was covered in darkness, Naruto could see perfectly. He didn't know how, but he could. This is a Kitsune technique designed to blind an opponent, though it doesn't work on strong Kitsune, hence the reason you can see so clearly. He heard the Kyuubi say before sensing something nearby. Since he was so caught up in the fight, he hadn't realized that they were being watched, and by the feel of the chakra signatures they were mostly wind users with some earth jutsu abilities. Instantly he disappeared in a burst of speed, appearing a second later right in front of the group, who were identified as being Suna shinobi. He walked up to the one he recognized as Temari. "What the hell are you doing here?" he asked calmly, though the response was them trying to find where he was, since he knew they didn't recognize him. XXXXXX with the Suna Shinobi. The Suna Shinobi watched as the two persons stood glaring at each other for a while. They could sense the chakra and had realized that they were fighting using genjutsu. Instantly though, the two fighters started performing hand signs before slamming their hands on the ground, and two extremely large animals appeared. The first was a giant purple snake and the second being a black fox wearing a coat. And since its back was to them, they easily saw the kanji for shadow in red on the back of the coat. They watched as the fox looked around for a while before shouting, "WHO of this pathetic world has dared to summon me?" it asked. They watched as the figure that was on its head jumped down to the front of Tay Fox. They then listened for a while as the fox started talking about the Kyuubi and heard the fox say that its name was Nox Umbra. They then heard the fox say that snake was one of the fox's favorite meals before crouching low to the ground and let out a vicious roar. Just when they were thinking that things couldn't get any worse, they were proven wrong as the shadows from all around them jumped into the air, covering everything in darkness and making it hard for them to even see a foot in front of themselves. Then, as if to make matters worse, they heard someone speak right in front of them that sounded a bit familiar. "What the hell are you doing here?" they heard the voice ask before they started looking around stupidly looking for the owner of the voice. Naruto stood looking at the Suna Shinobi before realizing they weren't going to answer as long as they thought he was an enemy. So he decided to take them away from the battle so they didn't get hurt. He gathered chakra and was about to perform the cross hand sign when there was a puff of smoke beside him. When the smoke cleared, there stood 4 exact clones of Naruto, all looking shocked by what had happened. He had performed a jutsu without even doing a hand sign. He thought it was Kyuubi and was about to thank him, but the fox, who heard what he was thinking, decided to speak. "I didn't do it. You just figured out how to perform jutsu without hand seals," he said. Naruto was shocked. He didn't know how, but he had just found a secret that could have helped any shinobi alive. He would have continued his thought if he hadn't heard people moving and remembered what he was doing. He instantly let his clones grab 2 people from the group each while disappearing in a blur of speed, the only sound being the person's scream of terror. Soon Naruto's clones had taken everybody outside the wall except for Kankuro and Temari, who had managed to find one another in the dark and were now standing back to back waiting for an attack. XXXXXX with Kankuro. "Shit, we're going to die here," thought Kankuro as he heard all the people of the group he was in scream in terror. He was completely terrified now. As he crept through the darkness, he pulled the bandaged item from his back and quickly unwrapped it to reveal Caruso, one of his puppets. He was ready to attack at a moment's notice, but everything was too quiet and he couldn't sense any threats. As he walked, he bumped into someone and quickly sent his puppet to attack, catching the person in its insane grip. He smirked in triumph as he walked up to see who he caught, though it wasn't who he was expecting. XXXXXX with Temari. Temari was like everyone else, wandering around aimlessly in the dark. She was with Baki and a few others, but after the first one of their group was attacked, they separated. Soon she heard the screams of everyone else that was with her as each of them were attacked. "What the fuck is going on? We're all just going to die," she thought. To say that she wasn't scared would be a lie. After all, she knew that Sasuke Uchiha, they don't know it's Orochimaru, was someone that could kill her 100 different times before she would even land a scratch on him, and by the looks of that other guy, he appeared to be stronger and faster than Sasuke, meaning that he was probably more dangerous as well. She had her battle fan out ready to attack and defend at a moment's notice, but was surprised when she walked into someone. She immediately started to carry her fan back to deliver a powerful blow to whoever it was, but was surprised as something wrapped tightly around her. She tried to break free, but the grip was too strong. That's when she heard footsteps heading her way. "Okay, who are you?" asked Kankuro as he walked up to his puppet following the chakra strings. He heard a gasp followed by a silent sigh of relief before a voice he knew well spoke. Temari had thought that she had gotten caught by one of the people fighting, but was proven wrong when she heard a familiar voice letting out a gasp followed by a silent sigh. "It's me, Kankuro," she replied to her brother's question. Kankuro wanted to let her go, but then it could have been a trap, so he decided to ask something that only Temari would know. "Who was the first girl I kissed?" he asked. This question would instantly throw anyone who wasn't Temari off. He waited until Temari let out a silent chuckle. "You've never kissed a girl in your life," was her reply, and Kankuro knew it was her. As he let her go, he felt around in the dark before he felt her arm grabbing it. The two siblings were glad to be reunited once more but was reminded of the situation when the final member of their group screamed. The voice was instantly recognized as Baki, their old sensei. The two instantly got in a back-to-back position though they still couldn't see anything. They would have stayed like that as well if someone hadn't grabbed the two of them and pulled them away. XXXXXX with Naruto had watched the entire encounter and had heard Tamari's answer to Kankuro's question, letting out a silent chuckle. He looked to his left as one of his clones grabbed the man known as Baki and carry him away. He also watched as the two siblings went back to back. He then looked over to his right back at the fight and saw Nox Umbra ripping Manda 2 to shreds slowly with Orochimaru looking around in the darkness blindly. He could tell that Orochimaru knew Manda 2 was a goner and was trying to end the shadow technique to better his own chances of survival. But what Orochimaru did, know was that Naruto could see perfectly clear. He would have gone after him but he knew that he was going to end this fight now, hence the reason he was getting everyone away. He dispelled all of his clones except one who instantly went and grabbed Kankuro while the original ran and grabbed Tamari, picking her up bridal style before disappearing along with his clone in a blur of speed. He heard the screams of both teens as he pulled them away from the fight. XXXXXX outside Konoha's gates Naruto appeared with still screaming Tamari in his arms in front of the rest of Suna Nin including Kankuro. As soon as they heard the screams they got in a defensive stance ready to fight however. Naruto just let go of Tamari who fell on her ass. As she looked up to see where she was surprised and relieved to see everyone unharmed. Kankuro instantly ran up and hugged his sister but then he remembered the person standing there and got back in his defensive position along with the other ninjas but Naruto didn't even move. Tamari got up and looked behind her to where Naruto was still standing. Seeing as she was so close she instantly saw the whisker marks on his cheek though his eyes now held a strange Sharingan that she didn't recognize. Naruto, is that you? She asked and got a nod while everyone else's eyes widened in surprise. I thought everyone was dead. What are you doing here? She asked again. I should be asking you that. Why didn't you leave when you saw the battle? You all could have been killed. Heck, what are you even doing here? He asked. Tamari decided to answer. Lady Tsunade sent a messenger hawk to Suna asking for help in the war though from the letter she wasn't expecting to lose since she only asked for a few shinobi. So Gaara sent us. She finished. Naruto could only smile remembering his friend and how he had become Kazekage, something that Naruto couldn't do since he couldn't take staying in the village remembering all the people who died. Even if he had wanted to he wouldn't. Because of that thought he remembered that he still had a snake to get back to and kill. He decided to end the conversation. Sorry, but I have to go back and finish the battle with Orochimaru, he said. Tamari and the rest of the ninja were confused. They had seen him fighting Sasuke Uchiha and hadn't spotted Orochimaru anywhere. Where is he? Asked Tamari. They watched as a sad look spread over Naruto's face before being replaced by anger. When he spoke they could hear the anger in his voice. He took over Sasuke's body and is using his abilities to fight me. That's why I have to defeat him to not only set all of those killed by his hands to rest, but also to set Sasuke free. He finished. Everyone was shocked. They knew that Orochimaru experimented, but to be able to take over someone's body and use their abilities as your own. Well, that scared them. Orochimaru was already powerful, but with a technique like that he could be anyone and do anything. Naruto, seeing the scared looks on their faces, decided to end their worry. Don't worry, he can only use that technique once every 3 years and he already used it. Not to mention that he won't be alive 3 years from now to do it again, he said. Everyone let out a sigh of relief hearing that. They knew that Naruto was strong, especially after taking down Madara Uchiha, which is something few ninja in the world had enough power to do. Naruto turned around to head back into the shadow-covered village to end the fight. Tamari, however, still had 2 questions that she wanted answered. Naruto, what happened to you and how did you get that weird Sharingan? She asked, which sparked everyone's interest. Naruto stopped before looking back at her and letting out a small smile. I fused with Kyuubi and he gave me these eyes as a gift, he answered. After that he turned around once more and disappeared in a blur of speed. Hearing what he said, the ninja were now sure that Orochimaru didn't stand a chance. XXXXXX back inside the village, Naruto had just appeared back in the village and looked around. Nox Umbra was still eating the giant snake and Orochimaru was still Wandering around. Naruto wanted to end this quickly, so he asked Kyuubi for advice. Yo Kyuubi, what do you think I should do? He asked. He didn't have to wait long for a response. Why don't you use your Sharingan's ability? Asked the fox. Naruto thought about it for a while and agreed with that course of action. There was a problem with that, however, the problem being he didn't know how to use them. Sure, he knew what they were from fighting Sasuke, Itachi and Madara, but that didn't mean he knew how to do them. He did the smartest thing possible. He asked the Kyuubi for help. Kyuubi, how do I use them? He asked. He heard a soft grumble before there was a reply. Well, I'll tell you how to use one of them now, though I'll leave the rest for when I can properly train you, he said. Naruto just nodded before waiting for the Kyuubi to explain one of the techniques. He waited for a few seconds before Kyuubi once more spoke. I'm going to let you try the Amaterasu Sasuno technique, he said. Naruto knew what it was since Madara had used it against him and almost killed him. Here's how it works. You have to let all the darkness and evil within you out and it will take a shape. According how much control you have over the darkness within you, the better you can control Sasuno, which should be easy for you since you had to embrace the evil within you during your training to control my power. Finished Kyuubi. Naruto instantly realized why Kyuubi picked this technique to let him try, seeing as he had already fought and embraced his darkness, meaning it would be easier for him to control Sasuno. As Naruto cut his mental link, he immediately calmed himself down. He then closed his eyes and reached deep down inside himself, gathering every evil or dark thing in him. He then snapped his eyes open and black fire shot out of his eyes surrounding him. He then willed the fire to take shape. After the fire formed, there stood a skeleton figure with black bones made from Amaterasu flame. In the Sasuno's left arm was a crossbow, while he had a shield strapped to its back, and on its waist hung a sword surrounded by black flames. Sasuno was at least 50 feet tall with fire wrapped around his bones, making it look like skin. Where its eyes were supposed to be were two glowing yellow holes. The being looked down at the figure it was surrounding while Naruto looked up at Sasuno. He could see he had a good amount of control and that Sasuno was waiting on his orders. The first thing he did was send a mental message to it, and in response Sasuno raised his arm that was holding the crossbow and pointed it right where Naruto was looking, at Orochimaru, before firing. XXXXXX with Orochimaru. Orochimaru had thought that he was going to let Manda 2 rip the boss toad Gamabunta to shreds, but instead a fucking fox had appeared, and not just any fox but one that could control shadows. Thanks to his Sharingan he was able to see the fox's chakra, though it was a little foggy because of all the excess chakra released into the air from earlier. He watched as the fox rushed towards his snake and had a short battle, seeing as his snake couldn't see and the fox barely had a smell to follow, which was weird. After some time he watched as his snake was ripped to shreds and was being eaten by the fox. He could only curse at losing his best pet. He wandered around in the darkness for a while trying to find Naruto, and thanks to his Sharingan he could see the large blob of chakra that was Naruto. He could also see a few extra chakra signatures. He silently watched as Naruto's chakra separated, which meant that he used Shadow Clone Jutsu. He then watched as the Narutos started grabbing the other people and carrying them away. He waited a few minutes before Naruto's chakra reappeared. He then watched as the chakra seemed to calm down a bit before he felt something. He could sense something evil but didn't know what it was. Then he felt an extreme amount of heat and could tell that Naruto was doing something, though he didn't know what. He then felt an intense amount of heat coming his way and did the only thing he could think of. He used Sasuke's incredible speed to dodge whatever it was. He felt something hit the ground, followed by a large explosion that momentarily lit up some of the darkness. It was at that moment he realized that Naruto had summoned Sasuno. He couldn't push his Mangekyo anymore, seeing as he was already starting to lose chakra. Although Sasuke had the immortal Sharingan, which is gained by taking your brother's eyes, which he did, he still didn't have the chakra supply to keep it active for so long, unlike Madara, who had close to 100 years to build up his chakra and get used to continuous use of his Mangekyo. As the little bit of light disappeared, he noticed that Naruto had as well, leaving only Sasuno standing there looking at him. He instantly felt something pierce his shoulder and looked at it. There, stuck in his shoulder, was what felt like Naruto's katana, with him holding it. The only reason he knew this was that he could hear his slow, calm breaths. I'm going to end this once and for all, he whispered into the snake Sanin's ear before disappearing. Naruto reappeared on top of Nox Umbra's head while he was eating The fox looked up to see who was standing on its head and saw his summoner. "What can I do for you, Namikaze-sama?" he asked. Naruto looked at the large snake carcass that wasn't even halfway eaten, showing how much meat was on the snake. Naruto heard the fox ask what he needed and instantly replied. "I want you to go back home. You've been here long enough and have defeated the snake as I asked, and now it's time you returned home. You can take the snake there with you as well," he said, pointing to the giant snake. Nox Umbra nodded his head before replying with a simple, "Hi," before picking up the snake and disappearing into a large puff of smoke. As soon as he left, all the shadows dropped back to the ground, letting light back into the village. Orochimaru, who had heard the summons leave, wasn't expecting the sudden light and was momentarily blinded, giving Naruto enough time to disappear and reappear in front of him and perform a spin kick with his sword still in hand, sending Orochimaru flying through the air. Naruto looked behind him and saw Sasuno standing there waiting for orders. He decided to end this fight himself and sent Sasuno away. As he looked in the direction the snake had flew, he noticed him getting up. He then watched as Orochimaru's stomach started to bulge and he opened his mouth, for a brown snake came out of his mouth. The snake then opened its own mouth and spit out a sword handle. Orochimaru then grabbed the handle and pulled out the legendary Kusunagi blade. He then got into a Kenjutsu stance and prepared for a fight. Naruto knew that normally his sword wouldn't stand a chance, but since he got so smart, he came up with an idea. Suddenly the sword in his hand started to glow a bit, since he was covering it with chakra to protect it. He then mimicked the snake and got in a Kenjutsu stance. The two looked at each other before Orochimaru disappeared. He tried to get behind Naruto, but that failed since Naruto saw what he was going to do and countered it. As soon as Orochimaru appeared behind him, he used his superior speed to spin around and swing his blade. Orochimaru quickly jumped back but was left with a large gash on the left side of his face where the sword had caught him. As Orochimaru started thinking of what to do, Naruto disappeared this time, except Orochimaru couldn't keep up with him fully. He could see a blur with his Sharingan appear right in front of him. He then screamed as he now had a large gash on his chest. Naruto once more disappeared, except he didn't stop this time. Instead, he kept slashing at Orochimaru until he was covered in blood and cuts. He then watched as two hands reached out of Orochimaru's mouth, stretching it open as a next body started to emerge. Naruto instantly realized what he was doing and rushed him, grabbing the emerging body before punching it in the face and shoving it back inside the first body, hence canceling the technique. He then reached out and grabbed what was left of Orochimaru's collar, lifting him up in the air before punching him right in the stomach, making him cough up blood. He then spun around and threw him right through a building that was still standing, making it collapse on its own weight. Orochimaru tried to shed his broken body again, but Naruto appeared and stopped him again by punching him in his face, then jumping into the air to try and cut him in half. Orochimaru, seeing this, held up his blade, which he had managed to keep a hold on, and blocked the attack. As Naruto landed, the two of them looked into each other's eyes. Seeing this, Kyuubi let out a smirk, or at least what you could call a smirk, before he took control of Naruto's eyes. He then whispered one word in Naruto's mind, though only Naruto heard it. "Tsukiyomi," he whispered. Instantly Naruto's Mangekyo started spinning and Orochimaru felt something pull at his mind. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a world that had no color and was only black and white except for a red moon in the sky. He also noticed that he was on a cross, and in front of him were two of the few things he feared, the Kyuubi no Yoko and a being he had seen once before in his life during his fight against his old sensei, the Shinigami. He then heard the Kyuubi's deep voice as it spoke. "For the next 36 hours me and the Shinigami here will torture you. While I eat away at your body, he'll eat away at your soul." He finished with an evil grin. The only thing Orochimaru felt after that was both his body and soul being ripped apart by the two beings in front of him. After a while he noticed the two step back before his body started repairing itself. He thought that he was safe until the next set of words left Kyuubi's mouth. "Only 35 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds to go," he heard the fox say as they started ripping him apart again. While Kyuubi kept Orochimaru busy, Naruto decided to check something. He placed his hand on Orochimaru's head before feeling himself enter his mind. Once he was inside, he instantly started searching for his target. He floated around searching the entire mind, learning everything both Orochimaru and Sasuke knew, but he didn't want any of that. Finally, after all his searching, he found his target. a door with seals and chains keeping it close. He quickly raised his hand and watched as the seals deactivated and the chains dropped to the ground. He silently pushed the door open and was surprised by what he saw. The room was a purple color with purple liquid draining down the walls and markings that looked like fire spread all across the walls, and they were pulsing with purple energy. Also on the walls were tons of seals that led to the middle of the room. There sat none other than Sasuke Uchiha, except he was chained to the ground and most of the bottom part of his body was missing, and slowly he could see more and more disappearing. Naruto quietly walked to the front of Sasuke and kneeled down. Sasuke had heard someone enter the room and walk in front of him. He was expecting it to be Orochimaru come to torment him, but who he saw was his best friend Naruto Uzumaki, and he had a look of sorrow on his face. Sasuke then watched as Naruto put his hand on his left shoulder and watched as his body disappearing slowed down a bit. He then looked into his eyes and was shocked out of his mind at what he saw. There in both of Naruto's eyes laid a Mangekyo Sharingan that he had never seen. Seeing Naruto there, he let out a sigh before speaking in a raspy voice. "What do you want, Dobi?" he asked. Naruto looked at him for a while longer before replying. "I came to help you get control over your body back. I know that you can do it." Sasuke looked at him before chuckling. "Why try and save me? It's already too late, and even if I wanted to, if you haven't realized, most of my mind is already gone," he said, referring to his chained body. Naruto looked at him with even more sorrow in his eyes. He got up and walked past Sasuke while the seals on the wall deactivated and the chains binding Sasuke dropped to the floor. Just because he appears to be winning doesn't mean he is. The only time he wins is when you let him win," said Naruto as he walked out the open door, leaving Sasuke to think about what he said. Naruto quickly exited Sasuke, Orochimaru's mind, and backed away from him. He then held out his hand as a spiraling sphere formed, creating one of his signature jutsus, the Rasengan. He pumped wind chakra into it next and watched as it got bigger and 4 blades of wind sprouted from it, giving it the shape of a shuriken. He was glad that he didn't need his clones to make this anymore. He now held in his hand his own original version of the Rasengan, the Fuden Rasen Shuriken, wind style, spiraling shuriken. He then watched as Orochimaru's eyes shot open, revealing that he had once again activated his Mangekyo. He knew that him and Sasuke's talk and all his wandering through his mind only took a few seconds, the same amount of time as the Tsukiyomi that Kyuubi had used. He watched as Orochimaru fell forward, showing that he had used his last amount of chakra to stop his technique from destroying his mind. He watched as Orochimaru started to dash away and got ready to follow until Orochimaru stopped. He then dropped to his knees and looked like he was straining with something. As he walked closer, he heard Orochimaru start arguing with himself before he stood up and let out a silent breath before turning around with a smirk on his face. "What's up, Dobi?" he heard the voice ask, and he realized that Sasuke had managed to take control over his body thanks to Orochimaru being both physically and mentally drained and reverting his Sharingan back to his normal eyes. Sasuke turned around to walk up to him but stopped when he coughed up blood. As his body started to fall, he closed his eyes waiting to feel the pain from the fall, but instead he felt his arm go around someone's shoulder as he was lifted up. He opened his eyes to see Naruto holding him up. He knew he didn't have much time. His body was littered with gashes and he could feel some of his bones were broken, and had a good idea to who did it. He smiled, knowing that from the look of his body Naruto had beaten the shit out of Orochimaru, and that was all he could ask for. He felt the life slipping out of him and a hand wrapped around his. He opened his eyes when he felt something dripping on him. He saw that it was Naruto, and there were tears coming from his eyes, though his face was emotionless. Sasuke knew he was dying, and quite frankly he didn't care. He had managed to escape the prison that was his mind and retake control of his body, all thanks to his best friend's help. He looked at his longtime friend and rival one last time and let a smile cross his lips. "Goodbye, brother," he said as his last breath left him. Naruto watched as Sasuke looked at him before whispering a quick goodbye as his breath left him. Naruto stood there holding onto his hand until the last moment and watched as he died in his arms. He started crying harder after that. He sat there crying for a while until he heard Kyuubi speak. "It doesn't have to end like this, you know," was what the fox said. Instantly Naruto's eyes shot open. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean that I can tell you how to save him if you want," was Kyuubi's reply. Naruto sat there in shock knowing that he could save his friend. Okay, I'm going to end it here. I wanted to let you all know that I started a poll on my profile, so I want everyone to vote if you haven't already, and I'll take that one down on Sunday and put up a new one. On another note, I'm going to let you my readers decide if Sasuke should live or die. His fate is in your hands, so all you Sasuke fans send me a review letting me know if you want him to live or die. If I don't get enough reviews, then I'll just have to kill him off. Now I'm trying to get at least 20 reviews for this chapter. You can also PM me with your decision. So until next time, sayonara. A grave decision. Let me start off by saying that I am so sorry for the long wait. Mount account was acting up and I couldn't post anything, plus I was actually thinking on where I wanted the story to go, and thanks to that I even came up with a sequel idea. Thaga, it's not a promise. Okay, I've decided to keep Sasuke, though he won't show up until later in the story, and you'll see why. Also they already seen the results of my poll and it's decided that Naruto will be in a harem. Now here's who all will be in it. Raven, Jinx, Blackfire. Now I picked these three because they got the most votes for who Naruto should be with, and I haven't read a lot of stories with the Naruto, Blackfire pairing, so I wanted to see how that would go. There might also be another girl joining the harem, but that hasn't been decided yet. Also, my new poll is up and this will cause a big effect on the story, so vote wisely. I have a few more flashback, dream chapters to do, but this one will be the last one held in the Narutoverse. All the others will be in the TT world, though only few TT characters will be introduced, like the characters from Hive Academy and a few others, maybe even the Titans. So since there's nothing else for me to say, let's get on with Chapter 6. A Grave Decision. P.S. I will also put up Chapter 7 entitled Training Begins for those who waited patiently, along with another Naruto story I just started called Fuinjutsu Master, so check it out. Okay. Disclaimer. Do I really have to say it? Every time I do it just breaks my heart. Thought. Hello demon. Jutsu. Hello radio, phone, etc. Hello talk. Hello. Scene change. XXXXXX. Naruto sat there shocked. There was a way for him to save Sasuke and it was being offered to him. He couldn't believe it. He could save his best friend and only other survivor of the Hidden Leaf Village, but one thing had him confused. If you knew a way to bring back the dead, then why did you tell me? He asked. Simple, because for one you had already buried everyone, and I'm sure you not into grave robbing, and two, everyone else was dead for too long. This technique can only be used on someone who's only been dead for 24 hours the most, and everyone else was dead for longer than that, was the Kyuubi's reply. Naruto sat there for a while before deciding what to do. How do I do it? He asked, waiting for the Kyuubi to reply. Well, first off you should seal up the body so that we can carry it, said the fox. What, why can't we just do it now and get it over with? Naruto asked. Kyuubi let out a sigh before explaining. Because I want to do it with my full power. I've never tried it with half of my power and it may not succeed, so I wanted to wait till I had all of my power before I did it so I could be sure it worked, replied the fox. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Before sensing the Suna Nin coming towards him, he let out an exasperated sigh before sitting down to wait till they arrive. The Suna Nin were outside the wall until they heard a large explosion. Soon afterwards they saw the shadows around the village drop back to the ground, allowing light to shine once more within the village. Quickly jumping through one of the holes in the wall, they watched as Naruto and Orochimaru fought, though it was more like a beatdown for Orochimaru. They watched as Naruto used incredible speed to beat the shit out of Orochimaru, knocking him around like a rag doll. They watched as Orochimaru was punched, kicked, slashed, and even sent through a building. They then watched as Naruto and Orochimaru was in a deadlock before the snake summoner went still and Naruto raised a hand to his head. Then a couple seconds later they watched as Orochimaru fell to the ground and Naruto steps away from him, creates something that looked like a giant shuriken but was made completely of chakra and was letting out a screeching noise, but just as he was about to strike, Orochimaru moved. They then watched as Orochimaru fell to his knees and could make out that he was coughing. They then watched as Orochimaru stood back up before turning back around to face Naruto, and they saw that the two said something to one another. They then watched as Orochimaru fell forward, but before he could hit the ground Naruto dispersed his technique and ran to catch him. They then watched as the two once more had a conversation before Sasuke's body went limp. It was at this moment that they decided to go closer since the battle appeared to be over. Finally reaching Naruto, they all noticed that he appeared to be thinking about something. They were about to say something before Naruto stood up. He looked at them before looking down at Sasuke's body. Naruto was aware that the Suna-nin had arrived but was thinking of a way to preserve Sasuke's body until he returned to revive him. He decided to put him in a block of ice so that no one could get to him. Bending down on one knee, he held his left hand out before whispering, "Hang on for a while longer," to his longtime friend. He then let Kyuubi help him to mix his water and wind to create ice as a coffin of ice formed around the Uchiha's body. The Suna-nin behind him gasped at what they were seeing. They had never seen anyone be able to ice elemental jutsus, so this was a big shocker. Naruto then stood again before turning around to face the Suna-nin. "What are you still doing here? Shouldn't you guys head home already?" he asked. Everyone looked at him. They knew that their mission was over, so they really didn't have any reason to still be here, but they wanted to know what Naruto would do and to see if he'd be willing to come back with them, seeing as how his village was destroyed. Temari, deciding to take the lead, decided to speak. "We just wanted to know what you were planning on doing now and to see if you were willing to come back with us. Gaara can allow you to stay in Suna if you want," she finished. Naruto liked the offer, but he knew that he couldn't stay in Suna. His home was Konoha and he couldn't go to another village. That would make him feel like he abandoned his own village, hence the reason he wanted Kyuubi to take him as far away as he could. He was happy that they would offer him a place to stay, but he had to decline. "Sorry, I can't go back with you. I'm glad that you would offer, but Konoha was my home and I can't just up and leave to go to another village. So thanks but no thanks," was his reply. The Suna-nin, or rather Temari and Kankuro, knew that might have been his answer. After all, he was never one to abandon anything, especially not Konoha. But since he wasn't coming back with them and they knew that he wouldn't go to any other village, that left them to wonder if he was going to stay in Konoha for the rest of his DOS or if he was just going to wander the lands. "So where will you be going? Will you stay here or are you going to just wander the elemental nations?" asked Temari before Naruto let out a chuckle, confusing them. He continued to chuckle for a while before he gave her an answer to her question. "Actually, I'm going to leave the elemental nations. I can't stay in the village because then I'll be haunted by the memories of everyone being dead," he said. The Suna-nin were shocked. Where can he go that's outside the elemental nations? There was no place other than them, so that would mean that he would have to leave the world altogether, and they didn't know how that was possible. Naruto stood there looking at their reactions before he saw Temari come to her senses. He knew exactly what they were thinking. Temari couldn't believe that he was planning to leave their entire world behind. Though she didn't know how it was possible, she knew that if anyone could find a way, then it would be him. So instead of asking how he was going to do it, she decided to ask about the human icicle laying on the floor. "So what are you planning on doing with him?" she asked while pointing to the Uchiha laying in the block of ice. Naruto just looked at the body before replying. "I'm taking him with me. After all, I'll need someone to reminisce with," he said before making a cross hand sign. In an instant there stood 1,000 Naruto clones ready to take orders. "I want all of you to search the village. I want every single technique that belonged to every clan brought to me by the time I return. This way no one from another village can come here and take Konoha's secrets," he said before continuing. "Anything that's guarded by a seal I want you to break and get. Also gather all the supplies you can find that hasn't been damaged, including clothes, weapons, rations, medical supplies and whatever else you can find." He finished before the clones saluted before spreading out and searching the entire village, especially where they knew clan homes and the Hokage tower used to be, getting all the scrolls. Naruto then looked at the Suna shinobi before walking up to them to give them a message. "Tell Gaara that we won't be able to see each other again and to make sure that his village is kept safe so that none of you will have to experience anything like this," he said while the Suna-nin nodded while promising to give Gaara the message. Naruto then turned around and started walking towards the Hokage mountain with the faces of all the previous and the last Hokages carved into it. Temari, seeing him leaving, decided to ask where he was going. "Naruto-san, where are you going?" she asked, adding the honorific to the boy who had earned her respect. Naruto smiled at the honorific before turning around to answer her. "I'm going for my inheritance, then I'm going to come back here for whatever my clones find in him, but please don't be here when I come back because I'm planning on making it extremely hard for anyone to get in or out and I'd hate for you to be trapped in here," he said. He then turned around and continued walking towards his destination while the Sunanin decided to take their leave from the now dead village. Before he could make it far, however, he heard a shout and turned around to see a scroll flying towards him. He looked to see that it was Kankuro who threw it and was waving. Naruto waved back before turning around and finishing his journey. Naruto walked until he came to the base of the mountain. Instead of rushing up or just walking up the side of the mountain, he decided to use the stairs. After a while he finally made it to the top of the mountain. A lot of people knew that there were tunnels that ran through the mountain, but what they didn't know was that above every one of the Hokage's head was a secret entrance where the current Kage's belongings go to after they die, but only if they didn't have anyone to inherit it. Naruto knew about these because Tsunade had shown him where it was, though she couldn't open it as only a blood relative could. Naruto walked to the top of his father, the fourth Hokage's head, before sitting down. He looked over the now barren village that was void of any life. He let out a sigh before once more saying a silent prayer for all of his fallen comrades. It was at that moment Kyuubi decided to speak. "Hey, how come I didn't remember you being shown this or the fact that you were told where my power was?" he asked. "Simple, because I didn't feel like I was ready for the things my parents left for me, nor to completely control your full power, so when Tsunade Bachan told me about it I declined. I then told her to place a memory-suppressing seal on me so that I won't remember it and you wouldn't know about it, since at the time I didn't trust you." "So how is it that you remember it now?" asked the fox. Naruto thought about it for a second before a solution came to his head. "I guess that when we fused the chakra output was enough to break the seal, thus returning my memory," was his reply. Kyuubi nodded his head before asking another question. "So how do you get in?" he asked. "Simple, all I need is to reveal the seal, then place a bit of my blood onto it for it to know that I'm a relative, then I'll be let in," he said. Kyuubi nodded before an idea came to his head. "Then shouldn't you be able to get into the first and second Hokage's chambers as well, since you're a blood relative to them both?" Naruto was about to tell him no until he realized that what the fox said was true. The Uzumaki clan was a part of the Senju clan that left Konoha when it was founded, making the two clans cousins, so that would mean that he should be able to get into those as well. He quickly chose to get the contents that the two held as well, and also to try and get into the thirds, as to make sure that if anyone tried to break the seals and get in they wouldn't find anything, since he would have already moved them. So he once more created 3 clones and sent one to each of the previous Kage's heads. Since he knew that Tsunade didn't have time to put anything in hers, he decided to check anyway and made another clone and sent it to Tsunade's chamber. Tsunade didn't know it, but she could have actually gone into the fourth's chamber, she just never tried. Naruto waited till all of his clones were in place before each of them placed their hands on the floor and pumped some chakra through them. Soon a seal appeared above each head. Naruto and his clones then slit their hands with their newly acquired claws and dropped some blood on the seals, except for the one on the third's head, seeing as he knew it wouldn't work. Instantly there was a rumbling noise before a hole appeared above 4 of the 5 heads with stairs leading down into them. Naruto and his 3 clones went down and looked around. XXXXXX First Hokage Chamber. The first clone walked down a dark corridor that was a brown color and had carvings that looked like a forest. He didn't know if he was headed the right way, but he had his Sharingan ready and activated just in case if there was any traps. He continued walking until he reached the end of the corridor, and there was a large door in the way. On the door was a design that had a man standing in a forest with the branches looking like they were reaching for him. In the middle of the door was a whirlpool in the center, and surrounding that was designs of all 9 of the Baiyas from Shikaku to Kyuubi. The clone walked to the door and touched it, and as soon as he did, a seal appeared forcing his hand back, and then small trees came from the wall covering the door. He knew it was a defense mechanism to stop trespassers in case they managed to break in, but luckily for him he had the blood of the Uzumakis running through his veins. Walking up to the door, he used his nature manipulation to send the trees back into the wall. Then once more cutting his hands, since the first one he did had already healed, he placed his hand on the door and pumped chakra through it. Once more the seal appeared on the door, but instead of pushing him back it started to absorb the chakra and the blood. Soon afterwards the seal glowed a bright white color before disappearing with the door swinging open. The clone then walked into the room. Though it was completely dark, he could see a few torches lining the walls thanks to his night vision. He then walked to the closest torch and made a small flame appear on the tip of his finger like a lighter. He then used the flame to light the torch but was surprised when all of the other torches were lighted at the same time, allowing light to enter the room. Looking around the room, he saw that it was extremely large open area with a large pedestal that had a scroll about the size of the forbidden scroll of sealing. He walked up to it and opened it up to see what was in. Were two seals at the front of the scroll, and the clone decided to see what was in one of them, so he pumped some chakra into the first seal. Instantly there was a puff of smoke as what appeared to be a letter dropped out. The clone reached down and read the letter before rolling it up, deciding that the original might want to read it himself. The clone then reached out and took the scroll, strapping it to his back, and turned around to walk out until something that was in the back of him caught his eyes, making him let out a gasp of surprise before running back down the corridor in order to get the original. XXXXXX second Hokage chamber. Same time. The second clone was also walking down a corridor that was a bluish color with designs that looked like water carved into the wall. Just like the first clone, he also came to a large door, except this one had a design of a man standing on top of what looked like a lake with his arms raised. Spiraling around him in the shape of a dome was some water that arose from the lake. This was to show the second Hokage's control over water. Unlike the first Hokage's door, the second Hokage didn't have anything in the middle of the door. The clone reached for the door, and like the other clone, this door also had a seal, though it appeared to be stronger. The clone was pushed back by the seal and was sent flying, but thanks to his reflexes he was able to land on his feet. As he looked back at the door, he noticed there was a strange wind blowing. Then he heard the sound of rushing water, followed by the seal on the door glowing. Like the first Hokage, the second Hokage had also set up a security system of sorts. Instantly the clone realized where the wind and the sound of water was coming from. He watched as the seal started growing until it was covering the entire door. And that's when it hit him literally, as a blast of water shot out from the seal and hit him. Since he wasn't prepared for something like this to happen, he didn't have time to send chakra to his feet, and so he was swept away with the water back down the corridor. He was spinning around so much that he didn't even know which way was up from down anymore. He was swept farther and farther back down the corridor until he finally got tired of his little ride. Putting his hands in front of himself, he immediately started to concentrate. He then swung his hands so that both of his palms were facing his either side of him, and the water followed, separating around him. He watched as the water split, and he could now see that he was upside down, so he flipped over so that he would land on his feet instead of his head. He stayed standing with his hands pointing in either direction until the water stopped coming. If he had full control over his elemental control, then he would have been able to part the water around him without even raising a finger, but since he still needed training, he didn't want to try it. After the water stopped, the clone once more walked back down the corridor until he reached the door that was still completely dry. He walked up to the door and pumped chakra into it. The seal once more appeared, but this time it didn't push him back or let out any more water. Seeing this, the clone then used its fingernails to cut its palm, then placed it on the door and pumped chakra into it. The seal glowed again before shrinking until it disappeared completely from the door. The clone then pushed the door open and walked in. Like before, the chamber was completely dark with torches lining the wall. Once more the clone lit one of the torches, followed by all the others lighting by themselves. As he looked around the room, he noticed that it was empty except for an altar of sorts with a giant scroll on it. The clone walked up to the altar and grabbed the scroll, not bothering to open it, feeling that he should leave that to the original. The clone then turned around and started his journey back down the corridor to get back outside. XXXXXX third Hokage chamber. Same time. The third clone was sitting on top of the third's head, looking at the seal and remembering everything Jiraiya had taught him, or rather the original, about seals. He knew it was a blood seal, he just didn't know how to break it without the old monk's blood. Seeing that he wouldn't be getting in for a while, the clone decided to sit back and wait for everyone else. XXXXXXFIFTH Hokage chamber. Same time. The fourth and last clone walked down a corridor filled with tools and other construction devices. It was obvious that the builders hadn't finished building the inside of the chamber. The walls were a blue and white mix and had carvings of slugs on most of the wall. The clone continued to walk down the corridor until he reached a doorway with only one door on the hinges. The other was leaning up against the wall. Looking around the room, he noticed that it was completely dark, though it didn't have any torches, meaning that he had to push his night vision to the max since he wasn't used to it yet. The clone looked around the room and was disappointed but not surprised that the room was empty. The clone turned around and walked back down the chamber empty-handed, hoping that everyone else had better luck than he did. XXXXXX 4th Hokage Chamber. Same time. The original Naruto was also walking down a corridor. The walls were white with red flame designs at the bottom and toads were carved on the wall. As he was walking he couldn't help but notice that whoever designed this place was very good at what they did. As he continued to walk down the corridor he soon reached a door, or what he thought was a door. There wasn't any seam to show where it separa red from the wall, leaving him clueless about how to get inside. As he was looking over it he noticed chakra running through what looked like a seal. Though the seal was invisible he could still see it thanks to the Sharingan he had activated. Seeing as how his knowledge of seals weren't that great he decided to just use some blood and see what happens. As he bit his thumb and spread it over the seal while pumping some chakra through it he was surprised when nothing happened at first. Then when he thought that he might have came to the wrong place he noticed the seal started to glow. Then there was a puff of smoke as something seemed to have been summoned. Naruto looked into the smoke and could see a large amount of chakra, meaning that something big was in the smoke. Finally, when the smoke cleared, Naruto was able to see that it was a toad that was summoned. The toad was at least 20 feet tall, blocking Naruto from passing, and it had dark orange skin. The toad had the normal yellow eyes and strapped to its back were a pair of katanas in a X formation. On the toad's head was a bandana with the kanji for oil on the front, and the toad also wore some armor that covered its joints from being attacked. The toad seemed to be confused about where it was for a while before recognition came to its eyes. Naruto looked at the toad for a while before recognizing who it was. "Hey Gamataichi, how are you doing?" asked Naruto. The toad looked at the person who spoke and instantly he pulled out both of the katanas strapped on its back. "Why are you here, Uchiha? What do you want in this place?" he asked. It was Naruto's turn to look confused before he remembered that he had his Sharingan activated. Deciding to ease some of the tension, Naruto deactivated his Sharingan to reveal his normal blue eyes. "Don't worry Gamataichi, it's me Naruto," he said. Gamataichi looked at him for a while before asking the obvious. "If you're Naruto, then what happened to your hair and your eyes? Better yet, what happened on the whole?" he asked. Naruto, feeling a story coming on, decided to take a seat on the ground as he told the large toad what happened. By the time he was finished, Gamataichi had a look of sorrow on his face. Finding out that everyone in the Leaf Village was dead except Naruto was a harsh blow to all the toads. Then finding out what Naruto had to do to get justice shocked him even more. Naruto just sat there waiting for everything to sink in with the toad. "So what are you planning on doing?" asked the toad. Naruto got up from his seat before replying. "Well, after I get whatever my parents left, I was planning on just leaving. After all, I can't stay here knowing what happened," he said. The toad just nodded with his decision, knowing that if the boy stayed he might go insane from the memories. "Excuse me Naruto, I must inform everyone of what has occurred here," said the toad. Naruto nodded but remembered something before the toad left. "Hey, do you know how I'm supposed to get in this place?" he asked. The toad looked back at him before looking at the door. He had totally forgotten that he was supposed to reveal the lock. The toad then turned to face the door and opened its mouth. To anyone with normal hearing it would seem the toad wasn't doing anything, but thanks to Naruto's enhanced hearing he could make out the sound of croaking. Suddenly a circle appeared in the middle of the door with 4 rings and the kanjis for numbers from 1 to 25. It looked just like a combination lock. Naruto looked at the toad in confusion before the toad spoke. "It was the last bit of protection. All I know is that you're supposed to use some sort of jutsu to spin the dial," he said, and as soon as he finished the toad disappeared. Seeing as his help left, Naruto decided to take a closer look. As he checked he saw that there wasn't anything to spin the dials, meaning the toad was right. Now the only problem he had was trying to think of a jutsu that could. As he sat there thinking, it suddenly hit him while making him want to hit himself for just remembering one of his most used jutsu. He walked back from the door and held out his right hand. Instantly chakra started to form into the shape of a sphere. As soon as the technique was finished, Naruto rushed the few steps between him and the door while thrusting out his right hand and screaming the name of his technique. Rasengan. At first nothing seemed to happen, but soon the dials started spinning along with the technique. As he watched, Naruto saw the first dial that was in the middle stop before being pushed in. Then the rest followed suit and soon all the dials were on a certain number while being pushed through the door. Soon Naruto stopped the jutsu when he saw all the dials had already stopped. He looked around for a while to see what had happened, but when he saw nothing he began to think that he did it wrong. That there was the sound of locks turning and a line appeared going straight down the door. Naruto held his breath as the doors opened, allowing him entrance into the chamber. He quickly walked inside to see something he wasn't expecting. Inside the room was empty, but there was a large seal painted on the wall to the left of him. As he walked up to the seal, he noticed a short poem of sorts. In order to get what you require, an Uzumaki's blood this seal desires. Naruto understood exactly what it meant. In order to activate the seal, you had to have the blood of an Uzumaki, and since he was the only one left, he knew that no one else could activate this seal without his blood and chakra, since Uzumakis were known for having a special type of chakra. Naruto once more cut his hand open and spread his blood over the large seal while pumping out a bit of chakra. The room was suddenly filled with a white light, and when it died down, Naruto opened his eyes only to get one of the biggest shocks of his life. He wasn't in his father's chamber anymore. Instead, he was in a larger room that was completely filled with scrolls and very old-looking books. It looked like he was in a library of sorts. When he turned around to look behind him, he noticed a giant red swirl on the wall, but not just any swirl but the Uzumaki clan crest. That led Naruto to one conclusion. He had used a summoning seal and had been transported to Whirlpool, the place his mother and the other Uzumaki lived. He then turned around and noticed a pedestal that had a large scroll on it. Naruto walked up to the pedestal and opened the scroll to see what was in it. As he opened it, he saw some writing and decided to read it. Dear whomever is reading this, I do not have time to explain fully, but our village is under attack. I and my people know that this will be the end for us, so we have decided to take all of our techniques and seals and place them in this vault that you are now standing in. All the scrolls and books are every technique and seal ever created by an Uzumaki, even our forbidden ones. Whoever you may be, you must have Uzumaki blood in you, otherwise the seals placed in the vault would have already killed you from you entered. So whomever you may be, you are now in control of everything your ancestors have ever achieved. You are the legacy of this clan, now may you help us to rise back to glory once more. Yours truly, Shinma Uzumaki. After reading the letter a second time, Naruto let a tear drop from his eyes. He wouldn't be able to help the Uzumaki rise back to glory, or at least not in the world he was living in now, but maybe he could. Wherever he went, Naruto rolled out the scroll some more only to see a seal. Deciding to see what was in it, he pumped some chakra into it. Since it was clear he didn't need to use any blood. Where Naruto was expecting something to come out of the seal, he was taken by surprise when similar seals appeared on all of the books and scrolls in the room. Then in a puff of smoke they all disappeared, leaving only 2 scrolls in the room. The one Naruto had just finished reading and another with the kanji for Namikaze on it. Naruto looked at the scroll in front of him only to see the seal had changed and now had the kanji for seal on itself. Figuring that all the scroll and books had been prepared to be sealed in the scroll to be moved, Naruto rolled the scroll back up. He then strapped the scroll onto his back and walked up to the final scroll in the room. Picking it up, Naruto opened it to see a complete row of seals, each one having something sealed within it. He kept going until he found what he was looking for. The seal he was looking at looked the same as the rest, but it was what was written below it that caught his interest. Kyuubi Chakra. Naruto unsealed it only for a red scroll to appear. Opening the scroll, Naruto looked at the most complicated set of seals he had ever seen in his life, and right in the center was a swirl pattern. Naruto already knew what that was for and wasted no time in activating the key within himself. He then slammed his glowing hands into the swirl and turned it. He instantly felt the power start to rush through him and it was painful. He was about to let go until he got a warning from Kyuubi. Don't let go or all that energy will start to leak out and completely destroy everything. Don't forget that humans cannot handle demonic chakra, so if you let go you'll let all of this power out, killing everyone that it infects. As soon as Naruto heard this, he threw his plan about letting go out the window, so to speak. He decided to bear with the pain, which didn't last much longer since Kyuubi took control of the chakra and pulled it into Naruto's body. Kid, we have to get somewhere with more space for when I fully fuse the chakra with us, said Kyuubi. Naruto nodded in understanding. There was just one problem: he didn't know how to get out and he could feel the chakra building up. Naruto brought his hand up to his face to rub his temple, and that's when he noticed something. A seal that looked just like the one that brought him here was now on the palm of his hand. What Naruto didn't know was that when the flash of light happened, the seal had shrunk down and attached to his hand in order for him to return. Naruto quickly rolled up his father's scroll and picked it up while once more pumping chakra into his hands. He blinked, and when he opened his eyes he found himself back in his father's chamber with the seal that was on the wall now missing. He quickly ran down the corridor to get back outside. XXXXXX. Hokage heads. Same time. The first clone had finally made it outside and was heading to the fourth Hokage's head. He ran past the clone that was assigned to the third Hokage's chamber only to see him taking a nap. Just as he was about to go down into the chamber, he saw the original running up the stairs. Before he could even speak, he had two scrolls, one with the Uzumaki symbol and one with the kanji for Namikaze, thrown at him from the original, who continued to run past him. At that same time, all the rest of the clones appeared with their findings or lack of in one case. They watched as the original ran way in the back of the mountain until he was a considerable distance away. They were about to follow until a shockwave shook the ground. They then watched as a large pillar of red chakra was formed, going as high as the clouds. Then blue chakra started to spiral around the large pillar, and it looked like the two chakras were battling. Finally, the blue and red chakra seemed to merge, forming a purplish-looking chakra that they could feel was extremely strong. Finally, after it ended, the clones decided to go and check on their creator, but was stopped as he appeared looking out of breath. He looked at the clones and smiled before straightening up. He then noticed that each of them seemed to have a large scroll with them. Except for 3-2 being the one who went to the third and fifth Hokage chambers, and the last one who had the scrolls. Naruto had tossed it, including the first Hokage's scroll. So it seems that we each found something useful, said Naruto to his clones. They nod except for two of them. The first clone remembered what he was doing before and decided to speak. Sir, I think that I've found something you might want to see, said Clone 1. Naruto nodded and followed the clone, but not before giving the rest of clones an order. I want you guys to try and find a seal that can get us into the old Mon's chamber, and while you're at it, find one large or strong enough to lock down the village, he said. Also get everything from the other clones and seal them up together. The clones nodded while opening the Uzumaki scroll and looking through it in order to find what their boss wanted. Meanwhile, Naruto and Clone 1 was back in the first Hokage's chamber looking at what had surprised the clone. So what should we do with it? Asked Clone 1. Get a sealing scroll and seal it up. We can't risk leaving it here where someone might find it, was his reply. The clone nodded. Before disappearing, he appeared a few seconds later with a scroll and some special sealing ink. The clone then sat down and began to draw advanced seals on the scroll. It took only 30 minutes, and thanks to his photographic memory he was able to remember this seal that Jiraiya had used to seal large objects. As soon as the clone finished drawing the seals, he went through at least 24 hand signs before slamming his hand down in the center of the seals while pumping all of its chakra into it. Naruto watched as the chakra traveled off of the scroll and towards the artifact. The chakra then surrounded it, followed by a puff of smoke and the kanji for contained appearing on the scroll. The clone then rolled up the scroll and stood before giving the scroll to the original and disappearing as well in a puff of smoke. Naruto turned around and walked back to the outside. When he arrived, he saw the other three clones drawing seals around the one on the third's head. Apparently they had found a seal that could open the one on the third's head. Naruto walked up to them and saw his family scroll laying on the floor open on a certain seal, the same one the clones were drawing. They looked at him and one got up with a large scroll on its back. This is everything gathered from the village. Surprisingly, it was more stuff than we thought. Also, there's more space for whatever we might find and for the Uzumaki scroll, he said. Also, we have some of the clones making protection seals all around the village. Naruto nodded his head. He was glad that the clones were doing as told. He then watched as the other clones stood up while wiping sweat from their brows. They then looked at the original, giving a nod which signaled that they were done. One of the clones then rolled up the scroll they were using and resealed it back into the Uzumaki scroll where everything else was sealed. The three clones then walked to Naruto's side and they each held up the same hand sign. Naruto watched as the seals the clones did started to glow before coming together with the original seal, creating on seal. The seals then started spinning while getting smaller until there wasn't a seal left. He then watched as the door leading down into the third's chamber was revealed. Naruto then walked down, leaving his clones outside to wait for him, but not before one of them gave him a small slip of paper with a seal on it. He again walked down a corridor that was a brownish color with carvings of monkeys and apes on the walls. Apparently whoever designed these chambers wanted it to be known which animals the previous Hokages used. Naruto once more walked until he reached a large door. He didn't even waste time in putting the seal he was given on the door. He watched as the seal he placed started to glow while making the other seal on the door appear. He then watched as there was a puff of smoke and out of it came a giant monkey. The monkey wore a pair of black pants with black sandals and a brown vest that was open. The monkey looked around before noticing the boy before him. "Who are you and how did you get in here?" asked the monkey. Naruto knew the monkey wanted an answer and so he gave him one. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze and I have come to secure the belongings of the third Hokage," he said. "And why do you wish to do that?" asked the monkey. Naruto, not feeling in the mood to explain, walked up to the monkey and placed 2 fingers on his head. Before the monkey could ask what he was doing, he felt a lot of information enter his head. He now knew of everything that had happened. "Is this information true?" asked the monkey. He only got a nod of reply. The monkey looked at Naruto for a while longer before nodding its head. "Do not worry, Sarutobi's belongings are with me and my clan. We will keep it safe from anyone who tries to get it," said the monkey. Naruto could only nod. He only wanted to make sure the village's secrets were kept secret, and since the monkey summons had Sarutobi's belongings, he knew it was safe. The monkey was preparing to leave before Naruto spoke. "May I get your name at least?" he asked. The monkey looked at him for a while before nodding. "I am Enma the Monkey King." And with that he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto turned around and rushed back down the corridor. He reached back outside in a matter of seconds and stopped in front of the clones who were waiting for him. He looked to see the clone giving him the scroll. "Everything's packed from all the other clones and the seals around the village are ready. The rest are just waiting for your command to activate them." Naruto nodded his head and walked to the edge of the mountain, looking over the once peaceful village. "Bring me Sasuke. It's time I finish this so I can leave," he said. One of the clones nodded and disappeared, reappearing a few minutes with the Uchiha still in a block of ice. Naruto then concentrated and entered his mindscape. XXXXXX Naruto's mindscape. Naruto appeared once more in the sewer that was his mind. He walked down the corridor until he reached where the Kyuubi was. It appeared that even though they had fused, Kyuubi was still behind bars, but he was back to the size Naruto remembered him being. "So how do you feel having all of your power back?" he asked with a smirk. Kyuubi just gave him an evil smile before replying. "I haven't felt this good in 15 years, he said. Naruto chuckled for a while before getting serious. Kyuubi caught on quick and knew what he wanted. "I will need control of your body for me to do this," said the fox. Naruto just nodded. Just as Kyuubi was about to take control, Naruto asked him one last thing. "So what's the catch for this technique?" he asked. Of course, something that can bring back the dead had to have a catch. Kyuubi thought about it for a while before replying. "Nothing much, you just have to give him your mortality, or in other words your life," he said. Naruto looked shocked. If he gave up his life, then he would bring Sasuke back, but he would be dead. He then noticed something. No matter what, the seal still connected him and the Kyuubi, meaning that if he died, then the fox would be right behind him on their way to the afterlife. Seeing this, he decided to ask a question. "What do you have planned? I'm sure you know what happens if I die and you don't want to die, so what are you planning?" he asked. The Kyuubi chuckled before answering. "You're right. I have no wish to die, and that's why I'm doing this. You see, as you channel your life force into the Uchiha, I'll channel some of mine into you, bringing your friend back to life and turning you immortal. It's a win-win situation." Naruto thought about it before coming to his decision. "Fine, do it. I hope this works," he said. Kyuubi just nodded and went to leave, but before he did, Naruto gave him a final request. "When you bring him back, I want you to seal him in a scroll. Put him in a state of animation so that he won't age or die." Kyuubi was surprised by the request. "I would have thought that you would want to talk to him as soon as possible. Why are you sealing him up?" asked the fox. "Simple, Orochimaru's jutsu makes it so that he has to change bodies every 3 years or he'll die. So I'm sealing him up for that long so that Orochimaru will die and Sasuke will no longer have to worry about him taking over." Kyuubi thought about it and found that the boy was right. Nodding his head, Kyuubi then disappeared, leaving Naruto the only one within the mindscape. Back in the real world, Kyuubi, controlling Naruto's body, got up from his kneeling position and walked up to the Uchiha popsicle. With a wave of his hand, the ice melted, leaving Sasuke laying in a pool of water. He then flashed through at least 50 hand seals before saying the name of his technique. Mizoku Auto, Damashi. Uekaeru, Demonic Art, Soul Transplant Jutsu. Naruto's body instantly went stiff as his hands dropped to his sides and his head drooped a bit, making it look like he had lost consciousness. Then his body started to glow a bluish color and something resembling slime came out of his mouth, nose, ears and eyes. The sludge then took form, making it look sort of human-like. The sludge then dived down and started entering Sasuke's body. Just as soon as it started, it was over. Sasuke's body then started to glow along with Naruto's once more, except while Sasuke was blue, Naruto was red. As soon as all of Naruto's mortality had entered Sasuke, he began to breathe at a slow, even pace. Kyuubi then held out his hand with chakra surrounding it and healed all of Sasuke's wounds. Kyuubi then started going through hand signs again to finish one of Naruto's last requests. Pulling out a blank scroll, Kyuubi went through a few more hand signs before activating his technique. Fuinjutsu. Kuda Anime. Sealing Jutsu. Suspended animation. Instantly seals started appearing on the scroll until it was practically covered in them. Then the seals started glowing along with the body of Sasuke before a dark void of sorts appeared and pulled him in. Seeing that everything was going fine for now, Kyuubi sealed the scroll with Sasuke in it back into the larger Uzumaki scroll and strapped it to his back. Getting ready to finish the last part of his promise, Kyuubi went through about 70 more hand signs before calling his technique name. Supeizu Jiken Ryoku Fuinjutsu, Space-Time Travel. Sealing Jutsu. Instantly a large seal started to form in midair right in front of the Naruto. Kyuubi kept pumping more and more chakra into the technique in order to make it stronger and more stable. As soon as he pumped the required amount of chakra into the seal, it started to warp and spin. Soon the seal was nothing more than a spinning vortex with a lot of colors running through it. Kyuubi looked at the clones that still remained and nodded. They caught on and dispelled themselves, giving the signal to the other clones to activate the protection seals that had been placed around the village. Kyuubi, however, didn't wait to see if the seals worked or not and decided to just walk through the spinning vortex. As soon as he walked through it, he felt the ground disappear from beneath his feet and everything around him was spinning. Just as quickly as it had started, the spinning sensation ended, but Kyuubi still didn't feel any ground. Wondering where he was, he decided to open his eyes, which he had closed when he walked into the portal. As he opened his eyes, he came to realize 3 things. 1. They were nowhere near the elemental countries, if all the tall building and other structures he could see were an indication. And 2. He was at least 200 feet in the air, hence the reason he could see the buildings so clearly. And the third and final thing being that he couldn't move any of part of Naruto's body except for his head, meaning that he couldn't land properly. Quickly he did the only thing he could to make sure nothing got damaged, though the chances of that happening were close to 0. The Kyuubi then summoned some more chakra and surrounded himself in a ball of chakra that was a dark purple color. As soon as the ball of chakra hit the ground, there was an explosion from the force and height it had fell from, and hidden within it was the body of Naruto. Kyuubi decided to wait until Naruto's body responded again, and so went back into the mindscape to start training Naruto in how to use his telekinetic abilities, since he didn't have anything else to do. Okay, finally finished. This is the longest chapter I have written so far, and yes, I know it was a bit boring, but I needed to let you all know some of the things he got from his own world. Also, next chapter is about some of Naruto's training and so forth, along with a few more chapters until we get to the main story. Also, I know that the jutsu names and descriptions sucked, and I'm trying to find a good translating site, so anyone who knows where I can go can leave it in a review or PM me. So since I have nothing else to say, I wish you all farewell. Training begins buck. Okay, first let me apologize for not updating in so long. I know a few of you might have thought that I abandoned this story or something, but that's not the case. I can give many excuses for why I haven't updated in a while, but instead I'll just give you a new chapter. By the way, since I took so long, I decided to write all of the flashback chapters and put them up all at once, so the next time I update we'll be getting back to the story. Also, by going and watching the TT episodes I realized that the graduation test was before Blackfire, so for that reason just pretend that it came after Blackfire, okay? P.S. I have posted the first chapter to my next story that I promised as well. Disclaimer. Guess what, I own Naruto. Naruto appears. Naruto. No you don't, you're just writing a story that you thought up with characters from other shows and me. Ghost. Really, I could have sworn I won the show in a poker tournament against Tsunade. Must have been a dream. Naruto. Yeah, by the sound of it, a really good dream. Ghost. Then I don't own Naruto. Starts crying anime tears, Naruto. Do you want me to do the disclaimer? Ghost. Please, I don't think I can handle any more disappointments. Naruto. Sigh. Ghost of the Kitsune doesn't own Naruto or anything else that might appear in this show, though he does own his ideas for this story. Thought. Kyuubi speaking. Kyuubi radio, phone etc. Kyuubi. Jutsu. Deity. Kyuubi scene change. XXXXXX. The Kyuubi entered Naruto's mindscape to find him sitting by where the cage door used to be, looking at seemingly nothing. Naruto didn't even seem to register Kyuubi's appearance. What's the matter, kid? Asked the Kyuubi. Naruto finally seemed to realize he was there before he spoke. I just can't believe what's happened in the past 24 hours. I mean, just 2 weeks ago I was walking through the streets of Konoha. I had finally gotten a girlfriend and I might have even become Hokage in a few months. I mean, I was considered a hero throughout the elemental countries for stopping the war. Kyuubi was getting tired of Naruto's ranting and decided to voice it. Be quiet. I know you are sad about what has happened, but there's nothing we can do to change it. But what we can do is become stronger, so that hopefully this will never happen again, he said. Upon hearing this, Naruto got a look of determination in his eyes. You're right, by whining nothing will get done. I have to train, so that something like this will never happen again, he said as he looked at the giant fox in front of him. So, what will we be training in first? Kyuubi-sensei? He asked. Kyuubi could do nothing but smile. He had never been called sensei before, but he liked it. Well, by both of us fusing together, you have gained a few new skills. So the first thing we'll begin to work on is your telekinetic abilities until we can move your body again, said the giant fox. Naruto nodded his head in acceptance. So how do I begin? He asked. Well, first I need you to meditate. This shouldn't be hard since you had to meditate for your sage training. Now once you clear your mind, I want you to visualize any setting you want and change your mindscape into it, said Kyuubi. Naruto looked at Kyuubi a bit skeptically before nodding and getting into his meditative position. He began to concentrate until he had cleared his head. Naruto started to visualize a large forest in his head. The forest was filled with birds, squirrels, foxes and a lot of other animals. There was a large stream running through the forest, and right next to it was a small cottage. The Kyuubi watched in amazement as Naruto's mindscape started to bend and warp until the sewers started to disappear and in its place was now a forest. The image warped for a bit until it returned back to the sewers that Kyuubi was used to. Naruto opened his eyes to see that it was still exactly the same. Nothing had changed. Kyuubi, sensing his thoughts, decided to help and encourage him. You did well, kid. That was the first time I ever saw somebody control their mind to that degree on their first try. Do not feel sad. Training the mind is a lot harder than training your body alone. You should be proud. If you continue like this, then you should be able to control your telekinetic abilities very soon, said Kyuubi. Naruto smiled at the praise. Though he and Kyuubi never got along before, since the war and all the training Naruto had to go through, the two had gotten kind of close. Though, now that they were fused, they would have to start trusting each other more. Naruto nodded to the fox and began meditating again, determined to learn it quick. Kyuubi, seeing Naruto go back to meditating, decided to check if Naruto's body could move yet. Naruto didn't realize when Kyuubi faded away from the mindscape since he was too busy meditating. Kyuubi appeared in the real world to see the chakra that he had formed still wrapped around Naruto's body. He reabsorbed the chakra before standing up, albeit a little wobbly. He looked around and saw that he was in the forest that he had seen from in the sky. Kyuubi decided to find someplace to stay since, by the size of the crater he was in, their fall had caused a large explosion. And he could sense people coming, though he knew that he could take them on with ease. The Kyuubi turned around and disappeared in a blur of speed. A few seconds later he stopped in a clearing at least 3 miles away from where they had originally landed. He instantly dropped, seeing as how Naruto's legs were still recovering from their trip through the portal, just like the rest of Naruto's body, and hence wasn't ready to move at that speed just yet. It took only a few seconds with Naruto's now stronger than ever healing abilities. The Kyuubi then got up and walked around, taking in the area around him. He had stopped someplace that had a small river, allowing Naruto to get water when he needed it. Satisfied, the Kyuubi returned to the mindscape to once more see the area around him warping, before once more returning to normal. He noticed that Naruto was able to hold the change much longer than last time. He knew that Naruto would get it, so he wasn't worried. He decided, since Naruto's body was functional again, to give him some real-world training. "Kid, give that a rest for a while. I need you to take control of your body. I'm going to start giving you some training," he said. Naruto sighed before getting up and disappearing from the mindscape. As he appeared in the real world, he was surprised to see that there was no sign of where they landed. Before he could think too hard on it, Kyuubi spoke. "Don't worry, kid, I moved us here so that we wouldn't get found," said the fox. Naruto nodded before he got a shocked look on his face. "Does this mean that you can take control anytime you want?" he asked the fox. Kyuubi chuckled before giving a reply. "No, the only times that I can take control is when you let me or when you're in the mindscape, and even then you can stop me if you wanted to, since this is your body and your mind is stronger than mine." Naruto let out a sigh of relief before he got serious. "So what are we going to be doing?" he asked. Kyuubi thought about it before coming up with an idea. "Well, first I need you to make 100,000 clones and separate them into 9 groups of 11,111 each." Naruto nodded and made the requested amount of clones. He was surprised because even though he made so much clones, he didn't even feel tired. He waited for the rest of Kyuubi's instructions. Kyuubi, seeing the required amount of clones, told Naruto what to do next. "Good. Now I want 1 group each to work on the following: earth, fire, wind, water and lightning manipulation, sage mode training, your telekinetic abilities, your Sharingan, and finally I want 1 group to learn and memorize each of those scrolls." Naruto nodded and gave each group their required tasks. "So what do you want me to do?" asked Naruto. "You need to get used to your body's new abilities, so I want you to make about 100 more clones to do various exercises. Then I want you to create another 1,000 to work on those seal-less jutsu," said Kyuubi. Naruto nodded and got to work doing as instructed. XXXXXX 5 months later. It had been 5 months since Naruto came to this strange new world. During this time, Naruto had never once left the forest. Instead, he spent his time training, learning new things and perfecting things that he already knew. He had already mastered the main elements and learned and memorized everything from the scrolls he had bought with him. He was now going on to the next level of his training. "You always seem to surprise me. You finished this part of your training in less than half the time I thought it would take," said the Kyuubi with what could be considered a look of pride on his face before getting serious. "Since you have finished this part of the training, I'll let you begin the second part." "Let's get started then," replied Naruto in an emotionless voice. Naruto had learned that in order to control the elements, you had to be able to control your emotions. If you didn't, then things could get very dangerous. So whenever he trained, he would become emotionless. Especially now that he was going to be learning to control the sub-elements. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Well, first I need you to create the same amount of clones you did for the first part of the training. Then I want you to separate them into 8 groups of 12,500 each. I want each group to take either wood, shadow, sand, lava, metal, ice, light and dust elements. Remember, however, that dust, light and darkness are the 3 hardest to learn," said Kyuubi. Naruto just nodded and got to work with his clones. XXXXXX 7 months later. Kyuubi was totally surprised. Not only had Naruto completed his training, but he had done it in little over a year, which in and of itself was a surprise. Kyuubi would never say it, but he was completely proud of how far Naruto had come in such a short period of time. He was just letting Naruto finish one more test before he decided if he was ready to leave the forest or not, though even if he decided, he knew Naruto could leave anyway if he wanted to. XXXXXX somewhere in the forest.